just more like, I like that format of just like, it just starts at some point.
Hey, I mean, I think he's the standard at this point, right? So I don't think it's bad to emulate.
No, I don't think so either. I've actually been doing a bunch of research where because I used to listen to Rogan especially during the
I mean, it just
dark.
depends how much pot you want to smoke, really.
Yeah, or psilocybin,
Yeah.
or elk meat for that matter. But I've also been watching Chris Williams' Modern Wisdom podcast a lot. I don't know if you've ever checked that out.
No, I haven't.
He's a former club promoter, British guy, looks painfully handsome, and but he's incredibly intelligent and has he has people like Eric Weinstein on. He's talking philosophy and all this other stuff, but I've just been trying to look at as many different models because I know how to talk to people, but I'm kind of probably like my grandpa, where after like 15, 20 minutes, people are like, okay. And they're like backing off from, trying to like get away a little bit. So I have a tendency to sort of be too verbose.
Oh, I think you'll be all right. We'll get along. I'm not worried about it.
So
I saw you drop your first podcast. I had to go do all that stuff today. I didn't get a chance to watch it yet, but
yeah, so that's with Kylie Whiting. That's actually Butch's daughter from Crypt Tech. I don't know if you ever ran around with Butch at all or met him. And I met her when I was helping them through my last day job, which I recently exited from. But like the Whitings are great people, and I never knew them when I lived in Boise, ironically. But
that's how it always goes.
Yeah, but no, part of that conversation was when I worked at Black Rifle, I hired plenty of people that were in their early 20s, and I get tired of people being like, "Oh, the Gen Z doesn't know what they're doing," blah blah. I think every generation says that about the previous generation, and so I like talking to people who prove the opposite.
Well, and it's also, if they're not doing anything, then we should probably interact with them more, right? Like, not just hope that they don't burn it down when we're gone.
Well, if you're not teaching or at least encouraging, which is not to say that everybody gets a participation award. It's just if someone's in a vacuum, how can you really judge them for the decisions that they're making?
Yeah, absolutely. I agree.
So you're in Idaho too now, right?
I am. I've been all over, but I don't think we'll probably stay here forever. We want to go a little bit further out. I'm okay if we get snowed in for the winter.
Where are you at in Idaho then?
We're just near Lava right now.
Oh, okay.
So just south of Pocatello, southeast Idaho.
Yeah, I just met some folks last weekend or a couple weekends ago at that Pro-Am when I was with Cope, like Rue. And,
oh yeah.
And they're out by what did they say? Like kind of in your neck of the woods. It sounds like.
Oh really?
Yeah.
I know a couple of those guys that were there. One's in Wyoming, and others in Ennis, I think. But yeah, super bummed I couldn't go to that. I went to that last year. That's my jam. That old school big loop roping stuff. It takes a lot of finesse, a lot of practice, and that's Ranch 101. So I went last year for the first time. We had a family emergency. I didn't get to go this year, but I actually kind of want to compete in it. Oh yeah, just people get old, it's hard.
But so that's probably
compete in that next year or the year after. We'll see how it goes.
Well, it's ironically, I'm leaving Salt Lake to move up into a barn in northern Idaho. Right when Code of the West is, I'm starting to actually know people down here and do stuff. But I'm going to keep coming back down this area. Like I'll just, stay on the couch or the back of my truck when need be. But it's definitely like a different kind of cowboy down here than what I grew up with in Idaho. Although Pocatello has a very strong cowboy history, especially with rodeo.
Yeah. No, when I first got out of the military, we had a condo down in Salt Lake. And I used to visit Salt Lake a ton when I was in. We used to go downhill mountain biking and all that stuff when we would take leave, because I had some friends that got out of the regular Marine Corps and moved to Utah. And then that's why I got out and moved there. But it seemed to get a little crazy for a while. So we decided to book it for the boonies.
Yeah. So I guess that's probably an important part of your story, that you are a leatherneck and then you've decided to become a redneck now.
Yeah. No, I was actually born on a farm
Oh, really?
in
Okay.
England.
In
Yeah,
England?
so yeah, in the UK.
Wow.
I was like 20 minutes from Stonehenge out in the countryside. So, but I'm fighting for the winning side now, so we're all good. We don't do the limey and red coat jokes.
No, no. I mean, so were you an army kid then, or like a military kid, and that's why you were overseas, or are you actually like, were you really, really born there?
No, I was really, really born there. I
Yeah.
had the accent and everything. I had to fight a kid named Danny Sherman on the playground when I moved to the States because he didn't like my accent because the little girls did.
Hell yeah.
So yeah, I earned my way. But
So
no,
how
I
did
didn't.
that? They'll just start there then. How did you go from England to coming to the States then as a kid?
My mom had some family in the States already, and she got divorced, and then we moved to the States. So we went from living in the countryside in the UK, which was, we had horses and an orchard, and vegetable garden, and all that stuff, and to Fairfax, Virginia, which is like suburbs of DC.
Mm-hmm.
So that's where I ended up doing middle school, high school, and some college before I joined the Marine Corps. But yeah, it's weird. I came full circle back to this kind of life, which I only really did until I was 10-ish, So
Wow. Man, okay, so this is interesting. I mean, I love a good story. Like it's kind of like the theme of Code of the West. So, I mean, because I was a nerdy kid in Ohio, nerdy sick little kid, and then my mom got the chance. My parents split sheets when I was about 5, and so my mom got a job opportunity in Boise that she wouldn't have had otherwise. She just worked her butt off and got the opportunity, and then asked me if I wanted to go. And I had always been fascinated with the West since I mean, as long as I can remember. And I also just, I don't know, there was something about Ohio that just didn't do it for me. Like I just kind of knew that, like, meh, like they call parks there like basically like small compounds with like walking paths, and like I wanted to go somewhere where a park was like there were things that could eat me. That
right.
seemed like more of an adventure.
Yeah, absolutely. I can't do the concrete jungle, that's for sure. I mean, I tried when I first got out of the military, and it was not good for my brain space.
Hmm.
But yeah, so I grew up in England. I took riding lessons, stuff like that. I actually watched horse trainer Monty Roberts as a kid working with troubled racehorses. He worked pretty closely with the Queen back then, and I was like, oh man, Cowboy's pretty badass. So when I was young, I moved to the States, like totally believed in the American dream, all that stuff. But eventually ended up in the Marine Corps just because college wasn't for me where I was at as a young man at that point in
Yeah.
my life. So, but yeah, did regular Marine Corps for 4 years. I was going to get out. I had a officer give me an intervention and ended up trying out for special operations. And then I did that for the remainder of my time in. And I just got out end of 2019. So,
Wow. Man, that's a heck of a time to get out. Like to come to civilian life right when civilian
oh
life gets
yeah.
turned upside down.
Yeah, it was pretty wild. My plan was to go back to school at the University of Utah. So we moved to a condo in the Avenues, and yeah, it was just total chaos with COVID and all the protests, and it was not a good time to be a ex special operator in a city that I don't know with no dues to watch my back. It was
Yeah, it's too bad you didn't get into the black rifle system. I came down to Salt Lake on Halloween 2020. I left Northern Idaho. I had like a handshake deal with Evan, and I came down, and my mom's like, if you were going to any other city in America right now, other than Salt Lake, I'd be nervous. And I was like, well, why are you not nervous? She's like, you're going to be like, she's like, I don't know, Evan. I have a feeling that the office is probably like a forward operating base though. And I got down there and it was like, or here, and it's like, yeah, I'm fine. This is fine. Doesn't really matter what happens
yeah,
here. We're falling back here. Uh,
yeah,
I
for
mean, like,
sure.
I actually ended up being a lot of fun. Like, kind of it almost felt like oh, what was that? Will Smith movie where he was like the last dude in New York City.
Oh,
Like
I Am Legend.
I Am Legend. Yeah, there was this sort of I Am
Yeah,
Legend kind of feeling because like there was no traffic on the highways, and even going into the office, there wasn't anybody really there. It was like a handful of us that would go in, So it was just kind of, but I'm that kind of person. I'm the person that, like, when there's like a tornado coming in, like, I'd crawl out of the basement and like want to be outside while it's getting wild and weird, because it's just so not normal. Like, for some reason, I'm always drawn to abnormal situations for some reason.
Yeah, we traveled a ton during COVID. We lived out of my Forerunner for a while, which I built out when I was pretty big into the overlanding thing before. There's a lot more Subarus now, but
Yeah.
we used to hang out in Moab and rock climb and mountain bike and all that kind of stuff. And then my wife got a dirt bike, so we started doing a dirt bike thing. She left me at the VA. It was like my first VA appointment when I got out. I was in there. There's like all these old vets and stuff like this. I was not in the headspace to like be in that place.
Mm-hmm.
And I was trying to like revamp my disability rating because I was at 20%, and like I broke my back on deployment and all kinds of stuff.
Oh,
You know, like
geez.
so. I was in there trying to get that revamped to get put into the system, and I was like, man, I got to get out of here. You know, and like I left, and then Maddie had to pick me up, and she didn't show up. And then they thought I was a homeless veteran outside the VA after the VA closed, and they kicked me off of the property.
You're kidding
And I was
me.
like, oh my, yeah, I hadn't shaved. Like I looked like a bum, you know? And I was like, oh man, this is like all time low, you know? So I was like walking back through the city. My phone was dead. I had to go into the 7-Eleven, buy a charger, and like charge my phone in the battery in the bathroom. And I got all these missed calls from her saying like she just bought a dirt bike and sorry she's late. So I ended up walking like all the way back to the condo. Yeah, it was a total shit show of a day. But showed up with a Kawasaki enduro bike, and I was like, okay, yeah, I'll get a dirt bike.
All right.
So,
Well, it was worth being a homeless vet out in front of the VA for a hot minute. If I
yeah,
can ride
exactly.
your dirt bike, baby.
A minute in possible other shoes if I didn't have her for sure. So, but yeah.
So were you already thinking about this as like kind of the path that you were going to be on when you were doing special operations still before you got out? Or did it just sort of like, this was the option after traveling around riding on the back of your wife's Kawasaki?
Yeah, no, the Western thing wasn't ever on my radar. You know, I actually have a photograph of a ranch hand on my when I first got out. I started doing some photography stuff and just traveling and kind of having fun and dabbling in some stuff, you know, and not having to be accountable to the
Mm-hmm.
military. So I took a lot of photographs. We drove all over the place. We lived out of the truck for a long time. The condo was just like rest refit, you know, and I actually have a photograph on my phone from over by the Spiral Eddy, like
Mm-hmm.
out near Golden Spike. And there's a cowboy gathering cows out there on a pony. And I stood there and I photographed that guy for like 20 minutes, and they were moving cows. And I was just like, man, this is cool, you know,
Mm-hmm.
but it didn't really click at the time. Um, but I actually worked for Fieldcraft Survival for a little while, and I was helping them dev out their mobility section and everything else. Um, me and Glover didn't see eye to eye when I decided that it was good for me to leave. So
I
I
understand that.
didn't end up staying there. It was good for me. You know,
Yeah.
I still kind of needed some of that veteran stuff and things like that. But um, for me, when I got out of the special operations, especially, I was either 100% or in or 100% out. You know, and
Yeah.
so um, before I met my wife, Maddie, I was totally prepared to go do a long walk or something like that. You know, I was in best shape of my life.
Mm-hmm.
So when I got out, I didn't want to ever think about what if I'd
Yeah.
done that? There was like a good year period where it was, you know, flip of a coin, I would have gone back. Um, so I ended up cutting off everything military hardcore. But while I was there, I actually purchased a horse. I'd been riding with some friends. I was like, you know, I grew up riding. Like these are pretty cool animals. You know, it's like a quiet thing, and I suck at it. You know, I suck at it now. So it wasn't like riding a bike. So I
Mm-hmm.
ended up getting a horse, and I started riding, leaving the condo and going ride him. You know, and that was kind of the height of things. Things were pretty weird then. So I leave the condo, go ride, come back, and then the people that I were riding with at the time, some close friends knew that fifth generation ranch in Idaho, and they're like, "Hey, do you want to come up there with us for a day?" I was like, yeah, why not? I'll come up there. And so I was that guy that showed up. It was evening time. I didn't know anybody. And this rancher dude showed up on a ATV and was like, hey, I need one. I need somebody to help. And in the military, if somebody was like, hey, I need one, like, you're there, right? You're that guy.
Yeah.
So I was like, I'll go. Jumped on the back of the ATV, disappeared. I didn't know this dude. Didn't know where I was. Like, had no essay of like what the lay of the land was. And we drove all the way out in the back of this ranch, and we found this old stick shift truck. And he was like, hey, can you drive this back? And I was like, well, shit, that's a man card, I'm glad I know how to drive stick. So I drove this truck back to the farm, parked it, and I was like, cool, what's next? And I think when I got out, PA school was super hard for me. It was death by PowerPoint. I was going back to the condo, like I was on Adderall for concentration, and it was just not a good place mentally either. So I ended up dumping that. And I tell a story a bit, but I ended up shooting a moose in self-defense the same day I quit school, which is like, I was having a really hard time mentally, like getting into like, what's next, because that wasn't working. And I was trained so hardcore to have a plan. So we went on a hike up Immigration Canyon, which you probably know where that's at, up behind the zoo. And we hiked that quite a lot in the middle of winter. And on the way out, we were hiking on top of like a good crust of snow. And we got all the way up in there. We hiked there quite a bit, like I said, and I knew there was mountain lions up there. There's a lot of tracks, a lot of signs. I even followed those tracks some days, like and big, adult, not juvenile, And so I have Porter, and he's a 90-pound Labrador, and I was like, all right, this is just how my psychotic brain works. I'm going to take a gun because he looks like a deer,
Yeah.
And so,
in full transparency, whenever I go hiking, even up by like Little Cottonwood or anything like that, like I always have, like, I mean, it's just a Glock 40, and it's funny because it's moose. Yeah. It's moose that I'm worried about more than anything.
Yeah, they're like the hippos of North America. They're like, people discard them, but they're actually super dangerous.
Yeah.
But we were hiking up this canyon, and we went around this bend, and we went back into the mouth of the canyon, and there was a bull moose on the trail just standing there eating some sagebrush or whatever. And I got the dog, and I know a dog's like a trigger for moose and stuff. So I was just like, hey, let's not go any further. It's been a good day, like let's just turn around. So we're walking back, and we're probably like 100 yards back down that trail, and there's a cow and a like year-old calf with her, moose. I'm like, worst combo, right? It's like a mama with a grizzly bear with cubs. And so I was like, hey, Mads, why don't you just wait back here? I was that kid to watch all this nature stuff, by the way.
Yeah,
so like,
same. Marty Stoffer's Wild America.
Yeah. I was sitting on the floor reading National Geographic in my diaper, I think. So anyway, so I was walking down the trail, and I had my camera with me. So I switched my camera to my left hand, and I knew my pistol was outside the waistband holster. And I think I unclipped it, And so they just start walking off down the trail, and the trail kind of goes down and goes around a bend, so you can't see around the bend. And so they kind of walk down a trail. I lose sight of them, and I turn back to say to Maddie, I was like, "Hey, come on!" And then all of a sudden, this cow moose is running straight back up the trail, and I got a drop off on the right side and an ice wall snow bank on the left side. Like, I'm not going anywhere more than like a foot off of this path. And so I just pulled it out, shot one in the ground. It did nothing. And then I was trying to camera in my left hand, trying to like sidestep out the way. And she did the ear back, swung her head thing. And she was probably 6-7 yards. And I dumped that 1911 in her chest at like 6 yards, all 8 rounds. So they had one in a pipe, eight in a mag.
Yeah.
And as that happened, I fell over this sagebrush, pulled my backpack off, and I put the camera away. And I was like, that was stupid. And then I grabbed the spare magazine and speed reloaded. But I'd never trained for that, in the military. You train for every situation.
What's the SOP for a charging cow?
Yeah, with a camera. And I was just like, God, that was dumb, and reloaded, racked it, back on her, but she was already laying down and she was dead. And I was just like, pfft. And then couple, 30 seconds later, my foot started doing that little tingly thing from ops, and I was like, still got it, and these two
that moose never
elderly,
saw it coming.
oh, gosh, yeah. And I said to my wife after, she's like, you're totally psychotic, right? Like, we just killed a moose. You've been out for
it's
1
a Tuesday,
month.
hun.
Yeah, gosh. And these two elderly ladies were walking up the trail, and I was like, "Hey, guy," and they had these little dogs. I was like, "Hey, guys, craziest thing just happened. I shot a moose."
And, so there's a total of 2 mooses. I already took one out, but if you keep going up the trail, there's going to be a bull up there.
We're going to be at Meese real quick. And yeah, so she was like, "Oh no, little Georgie here," she's like pointing to her dog, was chasing him. And I was like, "Oh shoot," that's why I ran back up the trail, and then I was in the way.
Yeah.
So she was like, my husband was into the Forest Service for 72. I was like, oh, well, I definitely got to call the game warden.
Okay, here we go.
Yeah. So, I mean, I would have anyway, but I hadn't even thought that far ahead yet,
Yeah.
So I called DNR, and then we had to walk all the way down the trail. So we walked like 7 miles back down to the truck, wait an hour. DNR shows up. Maddie now is going to wait at the truck. Okay. So keep that in the back of your head. I hike all the way back up this trail. At this point, it's like 10:30 in the morning, maybe 11, and the top ice is starting to melt. So now I'm punching through to my knees, walking up this thing. So we get all the way up there, and it's this rookie, and he's like, this is a big deal, right? And I was like, yeah, bro. I'm not out here hunting moose with a World War II relic.
Yeah.
I probably would pick a different weapon.
Yeah.
Like nunchucks or something sensible.
I didn't want to do it, bro.
Yeah. So we get all the way up there, and he goes around, he's checking all the casings, where everything is. He's looking at footprints, and he's like, "Man, you had nowhere to go." I was like, "Yeah, no shit, dude." So he gets on the
dead moose.
Yeah, he gets on the phone. He calls the senior wildlife officer, and he's like, "Okay, we'll be up there." So now we're waiting like an hour. So I've hiked in like another hour or whatever. We're waiting like an hour. So Maddie's been at the car for like 3 hours. So then we're waiting for these guys to come in. It's like another hour. Then they show up, and this senior wildlife officer's got this big red beard, and he's like, "Bet you didn't think you're going to shoot a moose today." And I was like, "Oh, thank God. Like, this dude's cool, And so he looks at the ground. He looks there. He's like, "Why did you wait so long to shoot her?" And he's like, "Why didn't you shoot her back there?" And I was like, "Well, I popped one in the ground. I thought maybe she'd stop." He's like, "No, these things don't stop when you got nowhere else to go." And he's like, "Well, you said you're in special operations. Let's go look at your shot group." And I was like, "Oh shit," better be good. And
was it good?
Lo and behold, it was like hand size right in her chest. And I was like, "Oh, sweet." He's like, "Oh, I guess I won't have to tell on you, And then he was like, "Do you want the meat?" And I was like, "Well, shoot, I wasn't going to ask, but I don't want to waste it." And so they made the rookie butcher the cow for me.
This is amazing. This is not how I thought this was going to go.
No, and then I had to hike all the way out with a hindquarter. They put it between two guys and made the rookie pack out everything else. So I just threw a hindquarter over my shoulder, and dude, I thought I was a hoss still, but that hindquarter.
So Maddie was down to the car
massive.
for what, 6 hours? Then and you just come back with a quartered moose.
Yeah, I literally walked down, slapped that thing on the tailgate. She's like, "Where the hell have you been?" I was like, "I didn't want to go to jail."
Yeah,
I had to do this.
I brought you meat, baby.
Yeah, she was not stoked. She did not have a caveman effect. But dude, we ate that moose for like 6 months.
Well, yeah.
But all that to say, in that pinnacle moment, I was like, I need to be useful again. I need to find a way that what I have inside me can be useful, and I needed to find a new way to serve. And so when I went up to that ranch, the dude doesn't get a lot of help. They're fifth generation. One brother runs it. The others try to get there when they can, but they got all these other things going on. Like, it's a lot, So I started going up there and volunteering for free. I would drive to Morgan from Salt Lake, which is like an hour, then drive 3 hours to the ranch, and then I'd drive home that night.
And
So I
this is
drive
perfect
8 hours a day.
well, because I have people ask me all the time, because people make the mistake and think that, well, it's a understandable mistake that they'd assume that I'm some sort of cowboy because I run Code of the West. And I mean, I've done cowboy stuff now, and I certainly grew up in a way. I say I grew up like Huck Finn, basically, like because Boise back in the day was not like Boise now. Like Boise was
With a
still
raft
very
float?
much. Do what?
With a
Yeah,
raft float?
yeah. Just going. I mean, we actually did float the river quite a bit, but
Yeah.
it was still very much like that old school, like have fun if you don't die, like kind of mentality. I mean, we'd go off
Yeah.
rope swings, up by banks and stuff that like killed kids. I mean, and that just seemed somehow to make it more fun or enticing. Um,
Right.
but but so like I'm not. I've done things now. Like my friends down here have like pushed me, not that they needed to push me that hard, but they gave me opportunities to learn while I was out here documenting stories and things. But people ask me all the time, I have people from overseas, like people in the Netherlands and other places going like, I want to come over, I want to learn, I want to be a part of this, like what do I do? And so far the answer I've gotten from pretty much anybody I've talked to that's in the lifestyle, in the community, is like, just show up and be ready to work. Like that's people want
Yeah.
help.
And it was good for me. I needed that. I was the first guy out of the truck. I got every single gate, like I didn't want him to have to tell me twice of what to do and how to do it. Like, because I mean, I went there and I didn't know anything.
Mm-mm.
I could barely ride a horse. The following week was roundups, and he was like, "You gonna come on roundups?" So I was like, "Yeah, I'll come. I got a horse. I'll come on roundups."
Uh-huh.
So showed up day one, and he was like, "Hey, you're coming with me." And he paired everybody else off. Everybody started trotting off to go cover down. And man, I hadn't really trotted on a horse, and we just went,
Uh-huh.
and we didn't stop trotting for I don't even know how long. And it's funny, a couple of years later, I guess 2 years ago, years later after that experience, I watched the documentary Cowboys, and they talk about this guy that wanted to be a cowboy, and he showed up and he trotted this big circle, and the guy couldn't walk afterwards, and he quit, and he went back on the bus and went back to Missouri. And that day, after riding and trotting all day with the boss, I had no skin left on the insides of my
I believe
knees
it.
and my calves. And I went back. I cried a little. I put petroleum jelly on because that's all I knew how to do. And I did that for 5 more days, and like, I was like, this is what I need, this
Yeah.
kind of challenge, this kind of job that just needs to be done every day. And it made me feel like I was helping. I was serving
Mm-hmm.
a simplistic but important purpose,
Well, and
and
also you guys, I mean, I've had, even before I worked at Black Rifle, I had the opportunity to know quite a few combat veterans. Like Rudy Reyes is someone that I met um, probably 4 or 5 years before I was ever at Black Rifle,
yeah,
and
I watched Generation Kill before I went into boot camp.
yeah, I mean, and actually, what's funny is I met Rudy, then I watched Generation Kill. I was aware of it as because my friend group. I don't know what your age is, but I'll be 40 next year.
37.
Okay, so I'm a little bit older, and so a lot of the guys that I knew that joined, for some reason I always like know Marines. I don't know. I mean, I know Army people now, but like all my
They're
friends.
easy to see. They're eating crayons,
Yeah, well, obviously, yeah. But like all my friends that were Marines obviously knew what Generation Kill was, but it wasn't like we just always talked about combat. Or I mean, like I had the great fortune of like like I've had neighbors growing up that were like World War II veterans. My grandpa was a Korean War veteran, and so like I watched my grandpa talk to his World War II buddies, and so I knew enough as a civilian to not just be like, "Hey, tell me your worst war story." Like I never did stuff like
Yeah.
that. It was just like
How
we
many
would talk.
people did you kill?
Yeah, the stupid questions that civilians ask for some reason every time. And so Rudy was the first time I kind of got some sort of insight into more of like the sort of tip of the spear kind of mentality. And then of course through Black Rifle, I've gotten to know guys like Evan and Matt, but then like Chris Craighead is a friend now. And um, I've started to like understand it's not just this like utility thing, because that's a huge thing I've noticed with a lot of the veterans that I'm friends with, that it's like, but it's especially with the special operations guys. It seems like it's learning and expanding your knowledge, and then also being useful.
Yeah, I think I try to talk to a lot of guys that are struggling when they get out, and I'm just like, man, just find a new way to serve.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I know you had to get told all the time how you're supposed to while you're in, especially in the conventional side, but like what you need is purpose. You
Mm-hmm.
had purpose before and you didn't even have to really think about it. You were just doing it, you
Yeah.
know, and you just need to find that again. So for me, I was able to go up there and it really gave me that sense of purpose back. And also there's a ton of stuff I just didn't know.
Yeah.
And another thing is guys like me don't like sucking at stuff. So I was
Yeah.
just like,
But
yo,
it's
I'm
good
going to
to put
stop
yourself in
sucking.
those situations, though. I mean, you maintain neuroplasticity. You know, it's good to be a student. I mean, you're never really not learning things in life. You just kind of get to this point where you're convinced that you don't need to learn anything else, and I
Right.
think that gets pretty boring after a while.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, and so because I sucked, I was like, well, I got to figure out how to train my own horse. And
Hmm.
that's kind of where the horse thing really started. So I trained my own horse and he ended up pretty like I could show up and people were like, damn, it's a good horse. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I mean, I still sucked at that point. And then roping and stuff, you know, I was always the guy getting off and doing the doctoring. Well, because I wasn't, you got to earn that right to rope
Uh-huh.
something, you know, it's a
Yeah.
lot of,
Low man
a
stuff.
lot, right. You got to pay your dues. So, and I got a border collie the day we moved into this place in Idaho and started training him. And that's the best dog they've ever had show up at that ranch.
Really?
And so, yeah, I actually took him to nationals this year,
You're kidding me.
but I'm just that crazy dude.
Well, no, I
People are
get
like,
it. I
who are
mean,
you? And I'm like, I'm an ex special operator and I watched YouTube,
yeah.
you know?
Well, that's the thing. There's not really like that many excuses now. I mean, I had a little bit of help setting up like the Shopify for Code of the West, but um, my entire career has been based on the internet in some way. You know, I was an early adopter of things. You know, I was being slightly older than you. I had like when I had a Facebook, I had to have a university email Facebook.
Yeah, I did too.
Yeah, like
I think I was the last year, but
yeah,
I mean, AIM back in the day, right? Like
oh yeah,
AOL, the
100%. Yeah,
phone and
yeah.
yeah,
And so like I pretty quickly, and my friends and I, we were always trying, like I had a friend whose his dad was a VP at Hewlett Packard in Boise, and so they were like explaining things to me. I didn't have a computer in the house because we couldn't afford one, but then I was, you know, being instructed and talked, someone was I had adults telling me about graphic user interfaces and the next generation of like Windows and shit that wasn't, I was just like, what? Like okay, like so, but I realized I was the kid that would sit at the library in the summer times, partly because my grandparents didn't have air conditioning, and so I could walk like 2 miles to the library and sit in air conditioning for 5 hours and then just read books. But when I realized I remember the day that I learned what the internet was, where I'm like, you're telling me there's a database of information that is accessible 24/7, and I'm like, sign me up. And so like I found mentors. I mean, obviously, like YouTube 2009 or 10 or whatever it was, kind of like when it started. There's not much there, you know. There's not like it
right.
had to kind of build. But at this point, you can pretty much. It doesn't mean you're going to find the expert on everything, but you can find
Yeah,
enough
but
context to get you by to
yeah,
get you started. I think.
you get your yellow belt for sure. You
Yeah.
know, I mean, I've trained my own bridle horses now. I've done, I've, I've started all my own horses now. I don't buy horses that I didn't start. I've trained outside horses now. I've trained two border collies, both of which will go to nationals, and everything ranch has really been open source. We have our own milk cow. We've never done that before.
Oh
Everything we
wow.
learned on the internet, you know, like we're raising pigs. We got the whole thing going. But
Yeah, I mean, I think there's the idea of adaptability is something that obviously comes up with you guys, the special operators too. I think a lot of times where it's like, you know, give me a paperclip, chewing gum, and a hammer, and we'll figure this out. You know, like, and I don't know. I've always noticed that it like, especially at Black Rifle, problem solving seems to be like a huge part of it. Like it doesn't seem to work very well. And I'm the same way. Where like I'm not the kind of person that if you say to you're at point A, I need you to go to point B. I don't want someone to explain to me everything in between A and B. I want them to kind of tell me like what I can expect a little bit, I'm going to like what's going to come out and bite me, but I have to figure out how to get from A to B. That's the kind of
yeah,
mentality that I have. I don't like the granular like, okay, this is step 1, this is step 2. Like I'll tell you what the steps are when I get over there. You know, like and it seems like that probably would come in handy, especially with like just deciding to be a cowboy and having to teach yourself from the ground up.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think also there's a little bit of, I think it's easier with that mentality to kind of fight the norm, and what we did isn't normal. Most people have to be born into this way of life. And I was prepared to pay my dues. I was prepared to learn the hard way through trial and error because I don't have anybody to teach me, and I mean, we're in our 3rd year out here now, 4th year out here. And I feel good going into this winter. You know what I mean? Like stacking hay. I got wood from the national forest because we have a wood burning stove to heat in the winter.
That's
like
awesome.
We finally have it all pretty down pat.
Yeah, you're starting to get it dialed in.
Yeah, and I get to rope at brandings now. Like my skills are good enough. I've paid my dues. Like it's all coming together. But I mean, I think that's also why. I mean, it just depends how you measure success too, right? Like I don't really get wrapped around monetary value. I think there's a need to have and there's a nice to have. And I think a lot of that comes from perspective from being deployed to places where, people are stoked to have shoes. But the main thing we're really doing here is raising kids. But I think long term we want to kind of flatten the curve a little bit of people getting into this. And I run a nonprofit for veterans right now that gets soft vets into bow hunting. And it's been hugely successful. And it's
a big thing. We were
program.
Trying to do that Black Rifle, like, there for a while too.
Yeah, it's been the best. All those skills are so similar to what you do when you're in. But for me, I did that when I got out. I got a bow, learned how to do it with all Dudley's stuff by myself on YouTube again. And crushing the bow thing. Like I felt good about it. And I was chasing elk around by myself, like trial and error again, like getting altitude sickness by myself in the woods. But
smart move. Sounds like something a Marine would do.
Right. But I really was searching for a lifestyle change, and I think this is, for me, has been the lifestyle change. It's how I want to raise my kids. We got 2 little girls and they never have to think that what daddy did for this country was wrong or that it's bad to say the Pledge of Allegiance, or, I get to raise them just to be them, and those kinds of things. And Margot run up to, she's a 3-year-old girl. She'll run up to a little boy in town with a beetle, and he screams and runs away. I'm like, we're doing it okay, I think.
Yeah.
So
Evans, I don't want to say too much, but Evans raising little assassins. And I always loved being around them when they were at the office. Cause it's just, they're going to be extremely capable. And, I like seeing that. I mean, I'm not a parent to my knowledge. But but it's something I always wanted to do. But I've also I've had it's funny, for being a civilian, I actually really relate, or I find myself relating more to a lot of veterans. I think just because I had this weird gypsy upbringing where I was traveling around all the time and I was moving from households all the time. And then as an adult, I've just been, sort of following this sort of weird Batman path where I've just been trying to learn from the League of Shadows, and then I'll go over to Tibet and learn from some ninjas or whatever. It's just, and I just kind of never really found myself fitting in as a civilian too much, or just as a human. But Code of the West is the first time where, how you were talking about, there's this sort of an alignment you're almost feeling where it's like you're finally choosing an occupation, maybe even a vocation would be a better way of saying it, that allows you to sort of feel this equilibrium between what your values are and what you're actually executing on the day to day. Does that make sense at all?
No, it makes total sense. Honestly, for me, I needed the quiet. I had a lot of crazy stuff happen in Salt Lake. Like the riots happened. I had a buddy that was on the police force. Like I had plates on and my gun and everything. I was about to get in a truck and go get this dude out because cops were cornered in a station with rioters coming through, and I was just like, gosh, I'm not out, every day, there's homeless people breaking into vehicle. It was just,
it was weird down here.
Yeah. And my truck got vandalized and I was just like, dude, I'm over it. So, but really here, I think that tranquility you're talking about and that for me, I'm not to get hippie, but like, this is where we're supposed to be, like there's a reason why going hiking makes you feel better, and I get to thankfully be here every day and do a lot of work on me.
Yeah.
But it's because I have the quiet and the stillness to be able to recognize that and work on that, and I think you see all these celebrities and stuff, and they're all talking about, philosophical things, and all it's because they have the money to have the time to do this and to meditate in this and truly know who they are and what their purpose is and what makes sense in life, and I think, man, the rat race has just got so many people in this drone of money and things, and Maddie and I, my wife and I, call it alive dead, and like, man, out here, all my stress is self-induced, right? Like, I'm having to work my hands. I have to learn new skill sets. Like, there's a constant challenge. It's a physical as well. Like, I don't really lift a ton anymore, but like, I feel like in good shape, and you get to interact and raise your kids. You're not plugging them into something, so
I'm very much the same way. I mean, I lived in Manhattan for a few years from 2013 to 2016, and I was just chasing down my career at that point, and I was working with a mentor, and it was kind of one of those things where you got to pay to play. Like I wanted to be a comic book creator, and at that time, comics were essentially headquartered in New York. And there's a part of me who likes a good story, So like, I literally came out of the Wenatchee Mountains on a trail maintenance crew for like 2 weeks, and then took the same Osprey pack that I'd used out there, and then moved to New York City, and ended up being there for almost 3 years. But I popped a fuse because I mean, like I said, Boise was a town when I grew up, but when we moved there, it was a big deal when the second McDonald's showed up. It was that kind of, I would say it's like a one
Walmart not like that size anymore.
Town. No, not at all. And so like when it wasn't like, and I'd been on the truck as a kid, and I'd been to big cities, but I never lived in a place like New York. And I felt like every cliche that people say about New York is true once I was there. If you can make it there, you can make it anywhere. It's a city that never sleeps and needed to die. Like, I mean, part of it was like, I was going out and doing things that were kind of exciting and interesting, but it just was too much stimulation. And I later learned when I was at Black Rifle, they were going to try to do this experimental treatment for PTSD that involved magnetic resonance. And trying to realign or recalibrate, I think, alpha, beta, and theta waves in the brain. And so I was supposed to be one of the people that was going to measure a baseline as a civilian. Turns out, not a baseline. My brain's messed up and weird. But what I learned when I was talking to him,
trying to think what mine's like.
yeah. I mean, like mine is the signal goes from the wrong direction, and it goes even at the wrong direction, going up. Basically upriver, it's moving twice as fast as it should, or as what is average. And so when I was talking to the scientist, because it wasn't like a clinical trial,
I don't think any of those things sound bad.
No,
who's to say it's the wrong way?
Well, I mean, so the reason why I shouldn't say it like that, you're right. Like, it's just it put a name or a face to the thing that I've been struggling with my entire life. Because what he told me was, my brain takes in, it's not an intelligence thing, it's a data thing. And he's like, your brain takes in exponentially more data just at any given time. Like, even when the time that I was tested for this, my brain wasn't an optimal setup. Like, so he basically was saying, like, my brain is always attempting to collate the large amount of data that I accumulate throughout the day. So, because he's like, do you have a hard time sleeping? I'm like, trying to go to sleep has been a hobby my entire life. And I don't like, I've gotten to the point now, and then this conversation helped quite a bit, where I realized that I need to sort of like create an SOP for myself to sort of slow down, calm down towards the end of the night, make sure I exercise enough during the day, make sure I get sunlight in the morning, basically start assessing what's good for my brain, basically, and then start kind of creating a process to turn the lights off as I go to sleep. And it was interesting having this conversation, but the reason why I bring it up is I didn't know or understand what had happened in New York, because I went there, I had a good time, until all of a sudden I was like, no, I can't do this anymore. Like, I almost like reached this physical reaction where I'm like, oh my God, I cannot stay here. Like there's just, it doesn't stop. And so even down here in Salt Lake where I'm at right now, I'm here for a couple more months. I have to keep my life small. Like when I was at Black Rifle, I basically lived at the office and slept here. And of course it was during COVID for part of it, but for one, I loved it. I really loved working at Black Rifle and working with Evan and everybody, but I can't go out and be out 4 nights a week and be drinking every night. I can't just be chasing activity. I have to sort of measure and sort of average it out over days to make sure
I also
I'm not
feel like that's
overstimulated.
like post 32 years old.
Yeah, it took me like almost 40 though to acknowledge it. Cause I mean, again, this is part of the reason why, like, I mean, offline at some point, I'll tell you about the first night I hung out with Rudy in New York. It was awesome, but I also learned that was the first time I drank with Marines. And I drank a lot. But,
Yeah.
but it's just, I think it's listening to my body and listening to my mind. Like you said, it's partly getting older, and it's also being like, when you're 20, nothing seems like it works right. At least for me, and I was a civilian. I was mainly just dealing with like kind of silly shit. But it's still nothing really quite synced up the way that I thought it should or wanted it to. And it's like, well, if I'm like never letting myself be quiet, never getting to a point where I can assess my own thoughts or like make a self-assessment on if I'm okay or not. I had a friend ask me in 2012, I was driving her from Boise to Portland, and we'd lost some friends in a really weird period of time in our lives the year before. And I was pretty messed up, to be honest with you. But she goes, Chris, what makes you happy? And I couldn't answer the question with one thing. Like I had never occurred to me to stop and ask myself that question. And I did not know how to answer it at all.
But how old were you?
I would have been 26.
Yeah. So, I mean, the human brain doesn't stop developing until you're 25. And I think after that full development, I think it takes time for you to really get to that point of knowing yourself enough to then be introspective. You know what I mean? And to have a pulse on where you're at. That's when I got out, that was really towards the end of my 30s. SOCOM already ate one of my marriages, and I was just like, man, I don't need to change, like blah, blah, like, and it wasn't until after that I really was kind of, well, what makes me happy? What drives me? What's next? And I really think that that's what happens in your 30s. You start to really look at things that, unless you're in that New York type rat race, right? But I feel like for me, I mean, some dudes especially need help really recognizing when it's happening. But for me, I definitely realize like what's important, what's not, what my close circle is. I value my time, and I think it's because of life events up until this time that has influenced that, right? Like now I'm a dad. For the first time, I look at my mother as not, when she was raising me, she wasn't my mother, right? She was the woman that she was at the age that she was at, with the experience that she had gone through, making the choices that she was making, right? Like it's a real human dimension. You start to look at the world. And I really think that's really, I think that it just gets more and more the older you get. And, finally I'm 30, about to be 37 in a couple months. And I finally have just now figured out like what I'm truly going to do.
Yeah,
And,
you got me beat by a couple
my
years.
My goal was 40. My goal was 40. And
mine was 30. I didn't think I was going to hit 30.
Well, I mean, when I was in SoCal, I was totally fine with being a name on the wall. Like that was like my Spartan death, in a way. But
I didn't have even that excuse. I just for some reason had, I called it a life apathy, not a death wish. I was just like, meh. I'd almost died at just existing so many times as a little kid that, I mean, when I say I was hoping to make 30, I was like 12 when I thought about that. Like it wasn't like in my 20s. Then my 20s was just like, let's smoke cigarettes, jump off of buildings into trees and like drive cars fast, ride motorcycles fast. I just did not give a shit, like, at all, for a period of time, especially after my friends died, like, really quickly. I got into like mixed martial arts. Like, it was weird for an art nerd. I went like off the deep end.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you obviously had some childhood stuff, but I think even for me, I mean, I was a really angry teenager, and if my mother hadn't dumped me at track practice freshman year of high school and I had to keep showing up to that, I don't know where I would have gone.
What was it about track?
Yeah, I used to be like 125 pounds, which is pretty funny. But I think my coach was from England, and we kind of hit it off pretty close. And it's pretty wild looking back at it, because I think he was like 26, 27 maybe. And there's a lot of custody stuff going on still. And like, I didn't really have a super present father figure, and I was a pretty angry kid. And running for me was just something I could channel it into. And I had to go to practice, like I was required to. And then this 26-year-old kid now, right? Like, but my coach really took me under his wing. And I spent a lot of time going on proper training runs with him. He took me like to the national course senior year. Like, I ended up being the captain of the team senior year, and I got a D1 scholarship, like he really invested in me during those, and I did nothing but that. I came within $50 of saving up lawn mowing money to build my own altitude tent in my room.
Wow.
Because I was reading about what altitude does to distance runners. And Matthew Senchowitz went to the Olympics. He's won the Olympics a couple of times. And I used to race him in high school. Like, wow. But then I went to college, and my college coach came from Stanford, really good running school. And I was stupid. I was young. I had a girlfriend. I didn't want to go too far from home, or else I would have probably gone to Massachusetts or Colorado or something, And so I ended up going to GMU in Virginia to a D1 school, and he was supposed to build the school's like historic championship team. So he brought in all these cream of the crop runners, and I was privileged to go there on scholarship. And it was a full-time job. It was no longer an outlet to me, and I think that was probably the first time I went from being big fish, little pond to nobody,
Oh, yeah.
And I actually told a kid that after he made selection, a cocky guy, but he was super talented. I respected the hell out of him through the whole course, but I pulled him off the bus when he was supposed to go back to North Carolina to be told that he made it. I pulled him off the bus, and I was like, "Hey, buddy, you might be a big fish in small pond right now, but you're about to go to SOCOM. Stay humble, And I think that for me was kind of that transition, but I couldn't handle it. I still needed that outlet, and that's ultimately I was actually going to go be a ranch hand. I was going to go out west and bum it and be a ranch hand, which is pretty funny. But I walked into the Air Force recruiter's office and then the Marine Corps office. But
so did you? Okay, so did you? If you were in college, did you go in as an officer then?
No, because I'd only done 2 years at that point.
Okay.
So I didn't have my degree finished. But I walked into the Air Force recruiter, and he was like eating a cheeseburger, telling me like, "Hang on." I was like, "Yo, who's this scrub?" So
hold on, I'm frying a desk.
Yeah, so I went next door. It was like a McDonald's cheeseburger. I'll never forget it. Half leaning on his desk, telling me to hold on a minute. And I was just like, no. So I went next door, and the next door happened to be the Marine Corps recruiter. And obviously they got me. So
yeah, there's something about the Marines that I think I'm drawn to, and maybe that's why I end up with a lot of friends that are Marines, is that like just the redheaded stepchild of all the branches, just the idea that like they're always having to like scramble for whatever equipment that they have, and they're like, oh, you guys are always the first ones into everything.
All the old stuff.
Yeah. All the old stuff. But like, I don't know, you're just sort of the redheaded stepchild. Everybody's always threatening to get rid of you or roll you into the Navy. And then it's like, then something pops off and it's like, yeah, except we just need the Marines to go take care of that real quick.
Yeah. We, it's a motley crew for sure. I think in the Marine Corps, it's probably not PC to say out in public anymore, but they say everybody's black. You know, like we're all the same. You know, and it's and you get what's called the green weenie all the time. You know, you get screwed over by the green weenie. So, yeah, everybody's equally miserable, and then I think that's what makes them so formidable and, you know, whatnot in combat. But
well, like you said, Spartan,
yeah,
I think it's that sort of. I mean, I read a lot of Stephen Pressfield when I have time, and like there's that sort of mentality. Like, like it's funny how from the outside looking in, I think that people think that, well, everybody's got their preconceived notions about how other people live or what they do, but like there's just something about austere circumstances that either makes someone crumble or it makes somebody just rise to the occasion. And I feel like the
yeah,
Marines are really good about that.
yeah. I mean, boot camp is. I'm sure it's different than when I went in it now, but like you don't get stress cards. Like it doesn't turn off. Like it's you get eaten alive, standing at attention by bugs. Like it's, you know, it's you got to want to be there, really, you know.
Yeah.
And then again, when you go through special operations selection, it's the same thing. Like it sucks so bad. Like you kind of need to know why you're doing it in the first place. I tell a lot of people that. A lot of people, I get a lot of DMs online, like, "Hey, I really want to go try out for special operations, or I want to go to Buds, or I want to be a motorcycle operator." And my first question is always, "Why?" And they're
Yeah.
like, "What do you mean, why?" It's because it's cool. I'm like, cool does not survive first contact. You know, like when shit sucks, you haven't slept, you haven't eaten, you have no skin on the bottom of your feet, it's raining and it's cold. What is going to keep you from saying, what am I doing? You know,
Yeah.
what is, you need a why, you need a reason to be there. And it's got to be a good one, you
Yeah.
know?
When I did that trail maintenance thing, it was towards the end of that weird period of time I was telling you about, where like my friend had asked me, "What makes you happy?" And it was actually a gift from a group of a friend of mine who was a federal contractor. He would go and do trail maintenance, and he had a group of guys, and I was friends with most of them. And you know, I was just kind of I wasn't kind of I was lost, you know, from like 2011 to about 2013. In that I'd been on this like trajectory where I was like I knew exactly where I was going with comics. I had like I call it my Mr. Motherfucker phase, where I was just like I'm just nothing's going to stop me. I'm a freight train. And then without getting too far into the weeds on it, I just never had friends die that were my own age, and they just died in very sudden and weird ways. And I had one of them, I had a watch die. Like he got terminal cancer, and um, but my friend group and I, we're all pretty dark anyways, and so we just would, as an example, my friend Heather, who loves Steinbeck, loves the book East of Eden. Um, Lauren, who had cancer, did not like Steinbeck, and as he was dying on a morphine drip, Heather's like, "Lauren, I'm going to read East of Eden to you until you die, and I know you hate it, but this is for me, not so much for you." And he's just like, "Fuck you, Heather." Like, I mean, that's just kind of the nature of our friendships. But like, so, but when it happened, though, without getting into the whole story, I just had completely, I realized that everything I was doing was stupid. Like everything that I had thought was important was not, and was trying to find my way through things. And when, I mean, there wasn't really a choice. I was told I was going into the Wenatchees for 2 weeks to go and get my ass kicked. And it's a wilderness area. So you don't take chainsaws, you take Pulaskis and crosscut saws and single bucks and rip saws. Like, and the guy that had the contract before my buddy had it carried 2 mules, or took 2 mules to carry all the equipment. The way he
Yeah.
undercut the contract was no mules. So we carried
Oh
70-pound
gosh.
packs up and
Yeah.
down the Cascades. I'd hiked, but I'd never done this before. I mean, and I grew up doing construction and working on trucks, and they were telling me that they'd hire guys from the special operations community, and a lot of times they do like one hitch, and they're like, "Nope, I'm done. I'm not doing that again." And there was a
Yeah.
point.
Cause that's their job.
Yeah,
I wouldn't want to
yeah.
go do that for free. Yeah.
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, I
I
was
think
getting paid. I was getting
going into
paid to
our
do it, but
final,
it's not
yeah, going into our
contractor
final
money.
exercise, your rucksack was no less than 120 something pounds.
Yeah, see, I can't imagine that, because I know what 70
That
feels
was
like, and
horrible.
it
Yeah.
was insane. And I mean, by like day 4, my feet were bleeding. Like my socks were like red and soaked. And I remember like my buddy Tim, like I was just I'd never gotten to that point where I've heard people talk about it now, where it's like, okay, my job is not to get to the top of this mountain. My job is to go left foot right now. And then I'd get to the
Yeah.
left foot and be like, my job now is right foot. And so Tim would be up at the top of the mountain and be like, hey buddy, there's like a big, field mountain or wildflowers up here, and you can see Mount Rainier. And I'd be like, Tim, I don't give a fuck what is at the top of that mountain. Like, but this one time, like around day 5, I got to the top of the mountain, and I mean, everything hurt extremely. And it was the most beautiful thing that I'd ever seen, though, because it was this like glacial valley. Mount Rainier was off in the distance, and there was just purple and yellow wildflowers just kind of like drifting in the breeze. And I sat down on a rock and started sobbing because my brain didn't really understand how like my body hurt so bad. But I also knew that the only reason I was seeing what I was seeing was because of what had caused my
Going
body to
through
hurt.
that.
And then Tim kind of snuck up behind me, and he's like, hey buddy, I think your blood sugar's dropping. You should probably eat a Cliff Bar. And I was like, okay, Tim. But the reason why I bring that up is that I didn't know that I needed a crucible, but my friends did. And it was the start of me being able to find my way back, or maybe actually not even way back. I think it was the start of me finding myself, and it took me a long time. It took going to New York. It took moving back to Ohio. It took all the stuff that's gotten me to this point. Like, but it kind of started with that moment to decide that I was just going to keep walking.
Yeah, but I think honestly, I think there's beauty in that because I don't think a lot of people get a crucible. I think
No.
some, I think there's a good percentage that do, but I think some people will use their crucible or whatever caused them to need to go to on that spirit journey as a victim mindset, and they'll never surpass it. And then there's people that go through things like that, and then they rise to the occasion, and they're able to really not straight away, but they're able to reap the benefits of
Yeah.
truly getting acquainted with what life is and where you fall in that and what you can bring to it and all those things. And then you have people I think that just coast through, and then I don't think they ever hit either side of that.
No.
So I'm thankful. I'm thankful every day for everything I went through in my entire life because it brought me right here to this moment with the introspectiveness that I have, and and I think for your case too, you essentially went through very similar parallels to what I have in the sense that I've lost friends. I've lost friends that I can make sense of in my brain why them and not me, and why am I still here, and it's like the not fair thing and all those things, right? And I really think though now the only conclusion I've been able to come to, and I think I'm sure you've come to something similar because I think it's the only conclusion you can really come to at all is that, if I got to speak to them again, they'd say, don't you dare waste a second of it. You know what I mean? And that's
Yeah, I don't.
really where I'm at in life. I'm like, I know dudes that can't be dads anymore. I know dudes that can't be husbands anymore or sons or anything. And I'm just like, I'm going to be the best fucking dad, best husband that I possibly can. And some days I will fail, but
Oh
that is
yeah.
because I am human, and,
Mm-hmm.
and I am imperfect. And I'm always going to, perfect's just this thing that you chase in
Mm-hmm.
hopes of
It's an
maybe
aspiration.
flirting with it for a second. You know what I mean? But it's not sustainable. So really, what are you doing with, and when you have that perspective, it's easy to look at things and be like, what am I doing of substance? What am I
Uh-huh.
doing that matters in this world, that can help others, that is good, that is true, that's honest? Why even have some alter ego?
Mm-hmm.
There's no time. There's no time for hate or ego or any of those things. You are here for a second. So don't you dare fucking waste it.
A
And
hundred
that's
percent.
really how I go through every single day. And that's why I live here because it allows me to reflect back on that a lot. And it's hard sometimes to maintain that perspective because of the way society is designed these days. But if you can, that is true human form.
I agree, and it's weird too because, or what I think is weird is it seemingly contradicts itself at times because, like what you just said, don't waste the moment. and you know, I think this is part of why I actually thrived at Black Rifle, is that like I got along with the mentality that you're describing. Everybody else would be running around like, you know, the sky was on fire, and I'd be like, it's a coffee bag, dude. Like, it, you know, no one's on a morphine drip, no one's on fire. Like, you know, it's solvable. But you know, another thing that happened when I was on that trail hitch that I think about a lot, and it actually reminded me, or well, it sort of set this tone for me. There's two things actually. One, before I did this, the same summer, or I'm sorry, the summer before, right after we were about ready to bury one of my friends, we'd gone to the viewing. Is it okay that we talk about this? I don't know. I know that we got here, but okay.
Whatever you want.
We're in the suit, the whole 9 yards. We'd gone to the viewing, and we went to this place in Boise called the Neurolux, which is I always would go to. And I was going up, ordering a whiskey, and I talked about this on a post in Code of the West too. But I was leaning against the counter, and I'm just in my own head. Like, I'm not really thinking about anything other than the fact that, like, holy shit, I'm gonna have to carry my friend tomorrow, and I've never done this before. And this guy looks at me from like to my right, and he's just kind of leaning, and he's like studying me, and he's a grizzly looking dude, and he's like, funeral. And I was like, yep. And that was about all I could say. And he got up and got real close, and he put a hand on my shoulder, and he squeezed it, and he looked me in the eye, and he nodded, and he walked away. He didn't say, I'm so sorry for your loss. That sucks. He just did this physical acknowledgement where I'm like, that guy knows. That he knows.
He knows.
And then that was this whole cycle thing that I'm like, oh my God, this is what it's like to be human. Like it's like, you can't explain it to a kid that this is going to happen, but this is what happens to all of us. And so that mentality
and you know what, I'm not a Bible beater by any means, you know, like I've seen atrocious things in my life, and things that I know for sure evil exists, you know, but it's moments like that where a person does that with another person that I know God exists too.
Yeah, same.
You know,
yeah,
and you can't have evil without.
Yeah,
you have to have evil to really be able to see that and appreciate that for what that is. You know,
and I started to realize in that moment that it's small gestures can mean everything as long as they're authentic and real. And so when we were doing that trail thing, I'm learning on the fly. I mean, like, I know I'm describing something that you're like, oh, that sounds familiar, but it was like your life at once upon a time. I was tourist in this space. And so
dabbling.
Yeah, dabbling. Like, I have a weird habit of dabbling in weird shit. But we were working a part of the PCT, and I mean, we were working like 15-hour days. You know, you'd be hiking, stopping, pulling a Pulaski out, whatever. But it's like people were close enough to Seattle where we were that you'd get like day hikers on some of these the switchbacks and stuff. And I mean, we're probably like day 7. I mean, I'm assessing the vegetation as toilet paper at this point.
Do you realize though that this wasn't really a camp for you to go fix a forest? This was like a concentration camp for young boys.
Yeah, basically. I mean, but I was 26, and this is my friends running this.
It was just hidden as such.
Yeah.
Instead.
Well, so this family walks by, and we were dirt bags. I mean, like, I look like something out of like a tin type photo, like from like 120 years ago. And I see the guy in the now I called him real short shorts, but I know they're silkies now. But this guy's walking by in silkies. He's got a flat top buzz cut. He's got a little day pack, and he's walking with like 2 little girls and a wife. And I remember him looking back at me, like just like looking at me at one point. I make awkward eye contact with him, and we were eating at this. We had oatmeal in the morning, and then I had Cliff Bars for lunch, and then we had quinoa, and we had what we called cheesy pow pow, which was just like the macaroni and cheese you get in bulk, like the powder you get at Winco.
Primo fuel.
Oh yeah, this is great.
Optimal nutrition right now.
This is it. And then a small bottle of whiskey, and then as many cigarettes that we could carry before we ran out. And
you literally just did a tour in Vietnam is what you did.
So this guy goes down the trail, and then like about 15 minutes later, he comes walking back like on a mission. And I'm like, oh shit. And there's no kids or anything. and he reaches into his pocket and he pulls out like a big old grip of Jolly Ranchers. And he's like, hey, I just got back from overseas. I know what it's like to just be out being miserable. Like, and he's like, if you guys don't have anything, these are great because you suck on them, it makes your mouth, it keeps your mouth from getting dry. And I almost wanted to cry because like it became so obvious that this was an intentional thing. Whether I needed Jolly Ranchers or not, they were fucking awesome, by the way, because I was sick of cheesy pow pow. But like, it was just like, here's another human. Here's another human that's just seeing another human and going, you know what? I don't know if this is going to make a difference, but I'm going to go back up there. I'm going to walk 15 minutes back up that trail anyways, because obviously he got down, thought about it. And he's like, no, that's stupid. I'm not going to walk. Okay, I am going to go back up there.
No, I think, he did know. That's the difference. Yeah. He did know. And I really think that that's the hard thing about America right now. America's soft.
Mm-hmm.
America thinks they're not soft. They are soft. They don't know what struggle is. They don't really know what racism is. Like, you don't know how bad it is in other places of the world. You know what I mean? But and because of that, you're asleep. You're walking around blind and deaf, and that's and you're sitting on your phone all day and you're not living, and I really think that that's you getting that touch in those extreme times of your life that allows you to know that you're on the right path. Like there's been a lot of times in I was born in England. I was an asthmatic kid.
Oh, me too.
Ended up becoming a D1 athlete, like went to special operations, and just went to nationals with a border collie, like all this, and we're going to build out this dynasty, right? Like, but it's because of what I went through and all those times of true and real raw struggle. And in those moments, I found enlightenment to tell me that I was on the right path, and that's after, there's big chunks of that where there's nothing, right? That's where you're looking and you're listening and you're searching and you feel like you're wasting that clock. But, every now and then you really find that struggle, and that struggle, man, that'll pull something out of you that lets you know that, you're not the only one looking out for you.
I think
that really just tells you that you're doing the right thing.
You're right. And I do agree that I think the vast majority of humans in our country now don't have. I was talking to somebody yesterday about this. I think the main difference is that I think the amount of intrinsically lazy people and intrinsically driven people is probably the same as it was 100 years ago. It's just that culturally,
you think?
I think the difference is that culturally you would be shamed for it 100 years ago. Like,
yes, but I think that's why there would be less.
Yeah, so I think there are more people now that are lazy, but I think
absolutely.
But I think it's just because basically what I'm saying is I think that the potential for laziness has always been the same. It's just that there was this sort of like mechanism in our society that kept people from.
I'll give you a perfect example.
Okay.
So Maddie's grandpa, super dope dude, served in World War II, all this stuff. He told me, we got a milk cow. I don't know anything about milk cow. I had a halter break that thing. I had to go out, rope it. That was when I sucked at roping. So it took me like 2 hours. Rope this thing. Didn't have a horse train. I didn't know how to dally and rope on a horse. That's a whole nother thing. Now you got to ride and rope and catch, right? People don't talk about the catch piece. Then you catch the cow. What are you going to do now? You don't know the next step. You know what I mean? So I went out there and caught this thing, tied it to a post, had to like choke it down, put a halter on it, and then it's dragging me around by this rope, right? Like, we had no idea what we're doing, right? Yeah. Like, we went through all of that. I built this milking stanchion. We figured out the first cup, you're like, I'm going to die, but we did it. It's amazing. I love raw milk.
Yeah.
I drink tons of raw milk. I have Ovaltine before bed, like,
yeah.
I know it's not good for my HRV, but whatever, who cares? But we called her grandpa and we're like, hey, like, we got a milk cow. And he said, back in my day, they made things, so now you don't have to do that. But that's the mindset because they spent so long in their life struggling. Mm-hmm. There was poor times back then, right? And having to come back and just find another job and continue to make money and contribute, and work hard, work real blue collar, rough, hard.
Mm-hmm.
Tech and stuff didn't exist.
No.
So now we got AI, we got tech, we got grocery stores everywhere. You got stuff has gotten so much. You got Uber and DoorDash. Stuff has gotten so easy.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So I really think that is why laziness has been bred. If I didn't have this call back to a primitive state where I could be for my TBI and mental health and everything, like I needed this. If I wasn't called back to this, I mean, I'd be in the machine too.
Well, yeah. I mean, and like I've been in and out of the machine. I mean, I guess technically Black Rifle was like a real job, except we were like on a pirate ship of our own devising. But I've tried to be an inside dog, as I've really tried. And I think that I kind of split it down the middle now, especially now that I'm like back on my own doing freelance and working with like other brands, and then also trying to build Code of the West out. I think that I'm kind of bridging the gap a little bit, where I'm like not the spooky outside dog, but I'm like the outside dog that like comes around the house and you're like kind of happy to see it. Like you don't think it's going to bite the kids.
Not
but you're like also wondering how
it
survives.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, like, I think that, I mean, essentially, like, I think that there is something intrinsic about, like, everybody talks about the cowboy thing, the New West thing, like how Yellowstone, whatever, like, and that, you said earlier, like, we got to make sure that people pass this knowledge down. Although people like you demonstrate that it's possible to just, also figure it out.
Yeah.
But I think that I'm a big Joseph Campbell guy, and like I'm a little woo woo on I'm a little woo woo on a lot of things, and I think that myth and story and these like legends that we have mean something, and like they remanifest themselves as stuff like Star Wars or whatever, but it's like Gilgamesh, and it's Beowulf. It's this idea that like nobody dreams about being incompetent. Like nobody like aspires to be like a piece of shit. People like when they think about projecting what they would like to be or who they'd want to be, it's people like John Wayne. It's people like Achilles. Well, maybe depending on your viewpoint on Greek mythology, but my point being that like there's
that's fair. People have heroes.
Yeah, and I think that like there's something hardwired to humans to like want to be. I think it's probably like a evolutionary biology thing. It's like if you can contribute to the group, you stay in the group. You don't get pushed out of the circle. You get to be around the fire. You get to, go hunt with somebody else. I think that there is a reason to try to be competent. I think that the rat race and the system that you're talking about that I agree with, by the way, your assessment of it, I'm saying, is that I think that like it's taken us out of the system we need to be in. Like we don't have the human connection, we don't have the community connection like we used to. Like doing what you're doing now, and then when I'm up in northern Idaho or when I'm down here helping at a branding or something, I say helping air quotes because I'm definitely not doing that much.
If you pass some beers, you're winning.
Yeah,
so it's all good.
It's just I think that we've created these sort of artificial compartmentalizations, I guess, for ourselves, where it's like you said, your Maddie's grandfather, it's like, well, we made things to make that easier. Like we tried to fix that for you so you didn't have to do it that way. It's like, well,
right.
In the process of fixing it, you removed the baseline knowledge of why it needed to be fixed at all, like, or improved.
Yeah.
Because we just inherited the fix.
Yeah. Or to fix didn't end up being the right choice, like, yeah. I'm sure there's some things that should be fixed, like
I like antibiotics.
Yeah, they're useful for sure. Yeah. but yeah, I don't know. I think, we're different types of guys, right? I think that's what it comes down to too. This is why podcast stuff is so interesting, because maybe people find that enlightenment in that other life.
Yeah.
But maybe like the dog piece that you're talking about is interesting to me, because maybe there are inside dogs, and inside dogs need that to find their enlightenment. But I'm definitely an outside dog. You know what I mean? Like, and tenfold. But I can't help but think that if you go back in time, everybody had to be outside dogs.
Exactly.
So I
Yes.
think the inside dog thing is a learned behavior.
I agree.
So, and I think that's where that you being turned off to enlightenment and you just walking around plugged in because of the ease, you become a lap dog. You know
well,
what I mean?
What are you optimizing for? I think that, and I remember,
Absolutely.
I mean, I don't know how, I mean, you said you were a bit of a cantankerous young man. I never got like in trouble with the law. Let me rephrase that. I was never arrested as a teenager. But I was the kid where, like, I say little kid. I remember taking an Iowa standardized test when I was like in elementary school and being like getting in a discussion with my mom where basically saying like, this is bullshit. How is like rote memorization going to determine my intelligence?
Oh man. I
And
was shooting cars with paintball guns and getting chased by police helicopters. So,
yeah, I mean, like I said, never arrested.
yeah, that's good.
This is also why I really get along with a lot of you guys, because I always had, my mom basically was Sarah Connor, and I always had contingency plans for everything.
Oh,
So
that's awesome.
up to the point where I had her cell phone in my pocket most of the time, and when I was detained by police, I would give them my mom's cell phone number to call, and I would silence the phone in my pocket while they were calling, and then I would clear those voicemails later. Um, and she does know that now, but probably conveniently forgot. But thing is, though, is that like I think that how to like I was really defiant. Best way I can put it. I did not like being a part of a system. I did not like. I really got where it really did it for me is I remember in junior high they were like, we're gonna have you take a test and we're gonna help you figure out what kind of occupation you should have. That pissed me off on principle because I felt like it was some sort of big state thing, and I was already like very much a little libertarian asshole back then. And when I got the results back, and this is where I was like, this is BS. Public school is not trying to make me capable. I was about 12. My job recommendations were it was a pastor, a priest, and a nun. Those three, like, and I wasn't really a spiritual person. I mean, I'm agnostic and spiritual, and like, but I'm also kind of Christian. Like, it's just kind of I don't know how to explain it very well, but um, I'm also a dude, and even though the world has changed drastically, and what that means, back in the late '90s, a nun was a nun and a priest was a priest, and I'm like, this is it can't even suss out the data. It doesn't even know the difference between me and being a guy and a chick, and it's trying to tell me like what my career path should be. So I was like very much like in a no, I don't trust the man from like basically like preteen.
I wonder what would happen if he took it again now.
Yeah, I don't even. I mean, who knows? Like, but I was that little kid where I'm like, public school is designed to make you like, a cog in the machine and like become a convenient worker or whatever. It's like because I also went to Montessori school for like 2 years, and which I loved because it was just like, here's how you should learn how to think, and I'm like, this is great. And then I showed up in first grade, and they're like, you can't read. Well, you're going to be a D student the rest of your life. And I was like, what? And yeah, that was my first example of like becoming better out of spite. Like I learned how to read to just prove that teacher wrong. And I've been doing that ever since.
That's good though. I think everybody needs a little fire.
Oh yeah, Mrs.
That's definitely how I operate. I showed up at my first stock dog trial after a bunch of people not giving me information on how to get there and everything else. And like, I'd call these people and showed up. They're like, is your dog even papered? I was like, yes, he is. Because I bought him for $50 on KSL. And they're like, who trained your dog? I was like, I trained my dog. And it's just like this whole thing. They ended up making new rules because I was kicking their ass too much. So
that's how they
but
always
it's good,
do it, death by committee.
And yeah, so now it's good though. That kind of stuff fuels my fire, and I think that's what's really drove me to learn everything I can in the ranching realm and like pay dues and stuff too, just because there is such a steep, not really so much a gatekeeper thing. I think it's just a lack of knowledge, like we're talking about. The everyday people have lost the knowledge to be able to participate, and whereas that used to be the norm,
Mm-hmm.
right? For so
Well,
many more.
I mean, like growing up in Idaho, actually, I got a good one for you. When I lived in New York, I worked for a company called Filson, which does like old school outfitter clothes. It used to, and now, I mean, it still does that, but it's a little bit more shishi bougie now. But
Oh yeah, I got some Filson
okay,
stuff.
you know what I'm
My
talking
jean
about.
jacket's Filson. Yeah.
Yeah, I love Filson. Grew up with Filson. I got a
Don't buy anything with zippers though, because they don't back the warranty.
yeah, not anymore. No, they used to though, unfortunately. But
Yeah.
so I helped open up the first Filson store east of the Mississippi when I lived in Manhattan, and it was down in the Bowery, which is kind of like above Wall Street but below Central Park. Let's say, it's just sort of it's a cool part of New York. Whatever. It used to be like where all the jazz musicians would shoot heroin in the alleys. So it's kind of cool. Whatever. Um, but it's by a couple universities, and so we'd have like 20-year-old kids coming in, and they'd be like, hey, my mom told me that I needed to come and get some socks and maybe some boots. And I'd be like, where are you from? They'd be like, I'm from like Georgia. I'm like, okay, so what do you have? And we're talking like this is like October, November, and they're walking around with like, what I would consider like not a Nike Cortez, but basically like a running shoe. Like, where I'm like, you can't wear that in a winter New York setting. Like you got like banks of snow, you got snow melt, you've got like if you want your feet to not freeze, and like you need wool socks, you need these kinds of boots. No one even understands how to layer. Period. Like people do not know how to
Oh
not
yeah.
die outside just based on what they wear now.
Well, it's also because they don't have. Yeah, they don't have to live in it.
No.
You got a lot. You can turn your car on from indoors to warm it up.
Yeah.
You
I
know what I
never had
mean?
I never
Like,
had a truck newer than 1976 until 2016.
that's pretty cool though.
It wasn't because it was cool. It was because I was poor. but I mean, it was
That's
fun to
fair.
some degree. But I mean, it meant that I had to carry like a 1/2 inch 9/16 wrench everywhere I went, and like spare parts for my truck. But that was Idaho. Growing up in Idaho, like
But again, at least you learned that people don't even know how to change a tire.
no, I
You know what I
mean,
mean?
but even then, I will say, even in high school, I wasn't the expert, but my stepdad had shown up one day with a 327 engine and put it on an engine stand and said, take it apart and put it back together. And it's like, okie dokie. So by the time high school rolled around, like I knew how to switch out parts or diagnose things to some degree. And, I was usually the guy at lunch break. People would be like, hey, my car's not starting. And it got to the point where I just started telling people, like, your battery's disconnected. And they'd be like, what? I'm like, do you hear a click? And they're like, no. I'm like, just go wiggle the cable that's on the box that's next to the headlights. And they're like, damn, dude, that's crazy. It started right up. And I'm like, yeah, okay, cool.
Yeah. But I mean, that's same for me. I didn't know anything about vehicles and stuff either. I built all my own overland rigs, and that was all the internet on forums.
Okay,
You
explain to me
know,
overlanding, because when I look at it, it looks like the expensive version of just having a truck in Idaho for me.
that's not untrue. I think it's like halfway between car travel and then like jeeping. I feel like,
Continue to elaborate.
journey is the destination, or like that kind of thing. Like
Is it a
it's
community?
overly
Is that kind of
built.
the idea? Like that you're like you get
Yeah,
other
I
people to
mean,
go do it with you?
when I used to do it back in the day, it was like you would like plan routes through the national forest, and like
Oh, that's cool.
you trans navigate in a vehicle, and like some sections would be super technical. You need like a spotter to get through. Like it it used to be pretty legit, and we had ham radios and
Yeah.
all the gear you needed to eat, sleep,
The
and
old
live out of that
Baofeng.
thing. Yeah. So I mean, it used to be pretty rad. Now I think it's just an excuse for a fraternity dude to put a bumper and a roof rack on their Forerunner that their mom bought them.
Yeah.
Like,
Well, yeah, because I
but
mean, like growing up, like because I had people come and visit me, before I moved to New York, and a lot of them were New Yorkers, and like if you were driving around in Idaho, way I grew up, you always had water. You always had like some sort of hand tool, like a Pulaski usually is what I'd always carry. And then you had like lighters, things that you could make fire with, an emergency blanket, just basic bare bones. Like if you got stuck somewhere, could you survive for 24 hours kind of shit. And so whenever I saw overlanding, and I've known people that are like, I'm an overlander. And like, aside from you, they're not the kinds of people that I want to explain overlanding to me is the best way I can put it.
Not. It's now just like a stupid waste of money. You know,
I mean, like, I can see how some of it's handy. I got stuck out in the desert here.
I know, but those people don't really get stuck though.
Yeah,
like they're not going and doing things to get stuck. They're driving to Panera. You know, like, let's be real. You know,
like I remember wishing I had those. Like I don't know what you actually call them, but like the sort of the traction pad things. Like they're always orange on the outside. Like
Max Trax.
Yeah, like. When I got stuck out in the desert here in Utah, it was after I knew the desert was thawing after the winter, and I was like, I'm going to be aware of that. I'm not going to go drive down in the rut. I'm going to just drive in the prairie. And somehow I still got down and got stuck in clay that was like probably that deep. And I was like ripping everything out of the back of my Tacoma. I was like tearing boxes down and like shoving them, like locking my differential, like rocking it. And I have a manual, which is even more fun. I mean, and I got it out. Like I had to call my friends. I was like, hey, there is a possibility that I'm going to need some help. But this is the other thing about growing up with a cowboy stepdad is that like, there is no situation, like this is just the reality. There is no situation that you cannot get yourself out of. That was the way I grew up. Like it does not matter if you walk 20 miles to resolve the issue. You will solve the problem.
I buried our tractor last winter pretty gnarly. And I'm like, what are you going to do? You can't get a truck down there to now pull it out. You know, like you got a ton of snow. And I ended up having to I went and got the old Overland traction boards out and I got it out with that.
That's awesome. You used Overland traction boards to get a tractor out.
Yeah, my tractor's not super big. We're talking like 60 horsepower, but
still, it's not the thing that like.
I aired down the tires and I use the traction boards to get it out.
I love it.
Yeah, but that's why overlanding's been good here too. You know, like I know how to fix stuff just because I still suck at plumbing.
I suck at plumbing and electric work.
Like how that is a very obvious job where they haven't improved upon any of the materials that you're supposed to use purely because you have to pay somebody to come do it.
Yeah,
that is the original Apple phone.
Oh yeah, and just for the record, I'm not shitting on overlanders too on this one because it's like if it's a hobby that gets you out.
I'm only shitting on overlanders that get in a Subaru Crosstrek.
Yeah. Well, I judge myself for having a
stickers
Tacoma
on their car.
I mean, I always wanted a Tacoma. I had a 4Runner when I was in Ohio that was like a 2000 4Runner, which that was the body type of 4Runners I loved because it looked like an actual like.
Dude, all machine. 4Runners have been pretty epic.
Oh yeah, I love the 4Runner, and then my stepdad had bought a TRD off road in 2013. And because I'd grown up with 3/4 ton and 1 ton pickups because of the construction business, and except for my truck in high school, which was a 71 step side Chevy pickup truck, which is a whole different story. But he bought this truck, and I was like, I am buying this truck from you someday. Do not sell this truck ever under any circumstances. I will buy this truck from you. And so about 10 years later, well, not quite 10 years, about 7 or 8 years later, he's like, I think it's time to let it go, which I think now in hindsight, he's just like, Chris needs to have a vehicle. He needs to be an adult. And I ended up buying it from him, which was hilarious too. Cause I actually paid above Blue Book to my stepdad, for my Tacoma because it had an ARE camper shell on it. He's like, that's worth $2,000. Like, man. But that's the nature of my family. Cause like, we'll have like, I'll have people that come over to the house. Like Dan bought a pontoon boat one time. He still has it. And, Dan and my mom worked really hard, built a commercial construction business. They both grew up really poor. Dan like grew up poor. Like he lived in a plywood shack outside of a trailer that his family lived in, poor, and it had an extension cord running to it. So he's the kind of guy that if you walk out of the room and don't turn the lights off, he yells at you. Like, it's like, you're not going to waste the 10 cents. Except some days he's like, I'm going to go buy a boat. And he does. And so one of our neighbors is like, aren't you excited about your new boat? And he's talking to me, and I'm like, what are you talking about? He's like, you got a boat. And I was like, Dan got a boat. I didn't get a boat. I get to ride on the boat, hopefully. But, I think there's a mentality too out here where it's like, just because of your physical proximity to something doesn't mean that it's yours. And I think that that's something that city people don't quite understand very well, is that like people from really urban environments just seem to sort of assume that it's whatever in their periphery is just theirs to access for some reason.
Yeah. Well, I think that's the difference though. That's just working for something and appreciate everything you work for versus things being given to you a bit. And I think that's a cultural shift too. Everything out here, we started trying to pay people to come do stuff for us, and they started charging a ton more money than they should be, right? And so we're not making a lot of money to live this lifestyle and everything else. Like, every penny does count.
Oh, it's a love of the game thing for sure, from what I understand.
So now I'm learning how to sweep my own chimney so I don't have chimney fires, like how to fix giant bay garage doors, like all this stuff I've never had to do before, fixing an auto trough and doctoring animals. Like I've never done any of this, but like, I don't have the money to be calling the vet. It's $100 every time a vet comes out here before they even do anything, you know? So like, you really have to, and I think that's where the value comes from, is you've learned the best way you can to do things right the first time. So you don't have to fix it 7 times and spend more money, so it really puts value on things.
But you also see the value of just holding on to the thing and maintaining it too, though.
Yeah. And I think that makes you value other people's things, because like, if I don't like asking to borrow other people's stuff, because I know how hard they have worked to attain that. You know what I mean? And it says a lot to me too when someone says they'll lend me theirs, because they also know that I know how hard they've worked for that, and they know that I'm going to look after that the way that they would.
It goes back to that handshake, or the hand on the shoulder thing I was telling you about earlier with Steven. Like, there's just all these things now that, like, you see, I would see in a John Wayne movie, or I would start seeing firsthand.
It's the Avatar thing. It's I see you.
Yeah, I see.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, no, for real though. Like, I mean, and it's like, I think in a way, it's kind of like you're talking about going back to Maddie's grandpa again, where it's like, well, we solved all of that. It's like, we've seen the carbon copy of the mentality and the humans that lived the way that you're describing. If you're lucky enough to come out here or to be in the military, you see what mutual respect can look like. You can see it modeled still. But I think the rest of the world is sort of, like you said, just sort of existing, just kind of flittering about. And you occasionally bump into some other humans, you have a conversation, and you just move on to the next thing. Whereas out here,
but I will say this though, you're completely right. I mean, but that's the reason I think too. There's such a mixture of people right now fleeing cities and everything else. That's where the apprehensiveness comes from people allowing you into that Western culture, because it is so sacred, and it has been sweated for and bled for and cried over. And so you coming in and now trying to, right, and saved, and so you coming in with thinking everything's yours, disvaluing things, not paying the dues, not expecting to get the gate, all these kinds of that's where you have to shed ego, and it really has to be an enlightenment,
100%.
And I think that's why these communities are so close too, because they help each other.
Yeah, and our neighbors are like that in northern Idaho.
Yeah. But it's funny we're talking about all this though, because 2 weeks ago I had this entire epiphany. It's been a long time coming. So I run Notice Outdoors. I wanted to replicate a nonprofit that got veterans like me, mostly soft guys, into ranch work, but truly into it, not like a bro hangout thing. Like, no, you're going to have a station lane. You're going to learn how to do an H brace on a fence. You're going to learn how to start your own colt. You're going to learn how to rope. You're going to be an asset, right? And you'll graduate, and I will plug you into a ranch that I know that needs help, that you will be responsible for. And that's essentially what I did. And it's been so good for me that I was like, hey, dudes can benefit from this, you know? But it's such a steep learning curve, but I can provide that because I've been doing this now for 4 years, hungry, and I'm proficient. I feel like I'm proficient finally. But on top of that, I'm like, well, what I'm a big helper, right? So I'm like, well, what if I just open this up to all veterans and maybe they pay a fee and I make it a school, but it's a GI Bill thing so they can come and they can learn, then I can plug them in, you know? What's sustainable look like? And then I was like, well, nobody knows how to do this. Nobody knows how to doctor cattle and milk a cow, raw milk, and what's chicken 101, you know? And I think there's a lot of people trying to come back to this to be self-reliant again because there's so much distrust in what we're eating and consuming and all this stuff. So I was like, but how do I access that, right? Like if I just did a clinic here, that's just a local community, and the local community is already doing it, right? But if I could do that virtually, which is what I'm going to do, I can provide that nationally for people that want to learn.
Yes.
You know, and so I think that is two things. When I went to MARSOC, there was no recruiting effort. When it got formed in 2006, I went through all the paperwork and stuff 2010. No recruiting effort. There's no posters, no training plan. All those things exist now. At the end of the pipeline, when I got pinned an operator, they pulled me and a couple of other dudes in a room, and it was a recruiting effort from MARSOC. And they said, we need to recruit more numbers. How do we recruit more numbers? We are thinking about doing this, this, and this. I stood up and I said, you shouldn't change a thing, because the guys that want to be here because they want to be here will figure it out. And those are the guys that you want. You don't want to spoon feed everybody.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So, but I think there's a play to that. You have to provide the opportunity.
Yeah.
So, and I think that comes into paying dues things. I think that's into educating yourself things, being hungry for knowledge, everything that we've talked about. So we're going to provide virtual classes for all the one-on-one stuff that we spent the last 4 years learning.
That's awesome.
So that people that are hungry can come and learn, right?
Well, keep me posted, because if I can help in some way, let me know.
Yeah, no, I definitely will. We're actually trying to do the first one next month. And it's going to be my wife, Maddie, teaching everything, all the dairy breeds, what A2A is, everything raw milk, all the history on it. It'll be a classroom setup with a live demonstration, and then she'll make butter and everything else. So like 0 to hero.
Yeah.
If you're interested in doing a milk cow thing. And I'm going to do 101 intro to horsemanship, but I'm also going to do intro
as we spend
to
around
Fieldcraft
stuff. How's no one done this? This is wild to me, because it seems like this should be obvious.
Well, I think it's just there's a lot more people going back to ranching, right? But you know very well with your interaction with it, the only way to really you can't fake the funk with ranching. You have to either be born into it or you have to have paid your dues.
Yeah,
you know, and I feel like finally I'm at that point where I can share it, you know, and I hope, really my primary hope is guys like me will be hungry enough to learn and bring their families into the threshold and learn these homeschooling options and everything else to really build a new community nucleus that they can heal and have this perspective we've been talking about this entire time. If I could give anybody anything, I'd bottle this up and give it to them. This enlightenment of me being able to be awake, right? And I think you understand that. And
100%.
But the only way I know how to do that is to offer all the trial and error that I've been through the last 4 years and be like, here, this is your 101, right? Like,
in a weird way, you're doing what I like, what the final form of what I'm trying to do with Code of the West. Cause like, I'm a weird hybrid of like, here's just me being me. And like here's a map to the minefield as a human. And I'm framing it through like cowboy stoicism, but I'm also trying to reignite this idea of like the shared identity, the story, you know, the legend, the myth that we all could look at and go like, yep, that's what it means to be an American. You know, it's that. But even though there's a community aspect to the Instagram, there's not like an actual physical community yet. And I don't know how to do it yet. And that's something that I'm thinking of all the time.
So long term, Maddie and I are trying to move. I have no idea how we're going to generate the money. I had no idea how we're going to generate the money for this 30 acres.
Yeah, I was going to say, you're going to figure it out.
We figured it out. But the next place that we want to build for Porter Ranch is going to be a learning center. And every single thing that we build, the milking parlor, the round pen for colt starting, the horse breeding facility, everything will be built so it can be an education center. So we hope then to be able to provide a spring and a fall event that everybody can things like Fieldcraft could come and teach shooting and med. It'd be a festival for learning to live again, essentially.
Well, that's what the branding is, what the Lymans do that I've been able to come to now down here for 2 years. It's like, and it's funny because, so I show up like a goober head, like just being like, the first time I came down, I was invited by family friends of theirs whom I know through Black Rifle, but they didn't really know I was coming. And so, they sniffed me like a dog, a little bit. And then they realized I wasn't there to exploit anybody. And actually I was there to tell stories and like record what was going on. By the end of that first year, they're like, this is crazy. We've been doing this for many generations now. And because we're all working, have never had the chance to actually look back and see documentation, like to see videos, see photos, see these little moments happen. So
it's every day to them.
Yes. And so that's the other part of this, is that after this year, because this is the year where they're like, you're getting on a horse, by the way. And I was like, huh? They're like, and Scott Lyman, who's in the John Wayne stuff that I've been posting this week, he really earnestly said this, and I really appreciate it. He's like, we like having you around because all the things that we take for granted are special to you, and the things that, like, you think things are heroic or really important are the things that we just get up and do. And so, and it's not that it's.
I got told the exact same thing helping.
Really? What did they tell you?
I still help at that ranch. I'm going to go help them gather cows all fall and starting in 2 weeks. But the primary brother that runs it, he was like, I'm really glad when you're here because you always got this big smile on your face and everything's new and it's awesome and you're crushing it and it's positive and you want to learn. And I get to watch you do that.
Yeah.
And it's funny because he said to me, he's like, this was my childhood and it wasn't fun.
Mm-hmm.
Like moving to pivots all day and paying those dues and he's like, man, I just wanted to go to a movie or something. Right. But like, you like, that's kid perspective too.
Yeah.
A little bit. I think that's me, but I've taken that too. And me as a dad now, I get to be a present father. It's like the best thing ever, right? But I get to sit there and I get to sit down with my 3-year-old daughter and I get to explain to her why. And I get to sit there and I say, if we don't go out and do chores, the animals don't eat.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? And so I feel like that's a kind of a new way to look at it. I should just say a refreshed way of looking at it, and it's like, hey, this isn't like a generational like beat down. This is a privilege.
Mm-hmm.
We are lucky to, and that's crazy. If we said that to Maddie's grandpa, for example, we'd be like, dude, you smoking crack, boy? Like, but no, this is a privilege. This is a privilege to live here and to do these things. And
it's a privilege to be an American too.
Eggs. Oh my goodness, it is. But this is the American dream.
Yeah.
I went from being born in England, learning disabilities, asthma, all this stuff, and I've been able to, just because I want to, and I've put into work to, be able to do this. And now I'm at the point where I want to give that back, and where else can you do that? You can't do that anywhere.
I'm a high school graduate that like was in remedial reading classes. Like, I mean, like I told you, that teacher was like, he's never going to be more than a D student. He's not going to learn how to read. He's, I'm a published award-winning author. I've learned what I've learned, through just sheer tenacity and obsessive will, basically.
And
YouTube. But like, I feel the same way you feel, where it's like, how incredible is this? And then I'm not making, Code of the West isn't keeping my lights on really right now, not in the way you'd think it was, but it's giving me this avenue to go and live the life that I've always wanted to live, to learn the things that I've wanted to learn. and meet the people that I wanted to meet and tell the stories that I wanted to tell. And like, I remember even as a kid, like when I figured out I wanted to be a comic book artist, I've still never quite wrapped my head around it, because I was like, I saw someone's comic book that lived in Ohio that ran around with my aunt and uncle, and they handed it to me and they're like, "This, our friend made this," and I read it and it was awesome. And I'm like, so you're telling me this is an adult who makes up stories and then draws them and then people buy them, and this guy does this for a living? And they're like, yeah. I'm like, sign me up. Like, this is incredible. I mean, you know, even though I grew up around truck drivers and construction workers, and I know the value of like being able to build shelter. Like, I am very proud of the fact that there's like door headers at the VA hospital in Boise that I built that will be there for a while. And no one knows about it because they just walk through the door. But I know that I learned how to build door headers that day, and that those are mine, and that there's utility there. There's an inherent utility to it. But then there's also this aspect of like what you're talking about, where it's like, it's absurd to me, even though my job is to tell stories at this point, or make coffee bags that look cool, like to tell stories. Like, that's a job. Like, we've come this far in society, and like as a civilization and as a human race and as a society, that like I can make a good living making coffee bags. Like,
yeah, but there's a caveat to that though. And this is really what lit a fire under my behind the last 2 months, you know, and I felt like I've been knocking on a door, and we've been, Maddie and I are very same, very highly driven. We're doing 900,000 things at the same time. Oh yeah, she is. I tell everybody she's the badass now, you know. But when trying to knock on a door, and you can feel it, and you can feel it, and you can feel it, and you feel that unsettled and that unrest of it coming, you know, like you're trying to put this change into your life. And I listened to a podcast a couple weeks ago. I think it was Denzel Washington, and he said, a celebrity who's got the time and freedom to be introspective, right? Like,
but he says a lot of interesting
I see
things,
where
to
it
be
comes
honest.
from. He said, you either get busy working on your dream, or somebody will hire you to work on theirs. And man, that was that last thing I needed to really shove me over the cliff, you know. And we are full steam ahead with this whole thing now. And but that's a choice, right? You either have a choice, you either get caught up working on somebody else's and you continue to back burner yours, or you truly invest in that. And I think that, not to be egotistical, definitely not egotistical for me. Like, there's a lot of humility that comes with that. There's a lot of failure and a lot of hard times that have brought me to that moment of enlightenment. But those are those against the grain individuals that end up standing out. You know, those are the people that, you know, found the West and defined it and everything else. So, you know, those people went against the grain,
signed a piece of paper
and
that they guaranteed they're going to hang, you know, if it didn't work out the way that they wanted it to.
But they committed to their dream and what they thought was right. You know what I mean? And so I think that's a big speak to you. And so you investing in somebody else's dream, you're building yours right now. And I think all those pinnacle moments of people checking in with you and everything else, that was the higher being telling you that you're on the right path, dude.
Yeah.
And I think, man, but the beauty of what you're doing is you are telling stories of this. You're telling stories of that guy, of how did you get there to where you know. You know what I mean? And I think that is important. Oh, how could there not be? How could there not be for the masses of people who don't? You know what I mean?
I mean, I imagine you're probably in the same boat though, where it's like I have these moments where I'll go months where I'm like just a machine, and I know I don't even have to think about what I'm doing. I'm just going, and then I stop for a second. I'm like, it's like I said earlier a few minutes ago about like not building a house versus like telling a story. It's like one of these things makes sure that people live, and the other thing is affecting how people live. And so like it's sometimes get caught
I know,
up.
but the other thing is saying that they did.
Sure. Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, you're right.
And I think that is where inspiration comes from for others too, as well.
I just think of me as a kid, and like the reason why we're having this conversation is because of the things that I gravitated towards as a little kid. And a lot of times they were informed by stories. and one, like, when I could read, like I said, out of spite to Mrs. Rostifer, I just read everything. My grandpa had a basement full of books. I went from like not being able to read See Spot Run to being like, I'm gonna crack War and Peace because you bitch. Like but I was reading a lot of historical fiction and books by this guy named Kenneth Roberts that wrote a lot about the French Indian Wars and the Northwest Passage. And I was just like, man, exploration, adventure, frontier. These are the things that kept creeping up in my mind. I was obsessed with Teddy Roosevelt because he was asthmatic and I was asthmatic too. And, like, I just think about how story story is really this thing that moves society forward. It's just that once upon a time, my job was like put bones in my nose and like sit around a campfire and tell the story out loud as an oral history. Now it's like a weird sort of, I think we lose sight of the fact that we lose sight of what is actually important about the things that we do sometimes. Because I think that there's a place for the storyteller, there's a place for the laborer. There's like when
100,000%.
Yeah.
And I think that's your calling,
It's my vocation. I had a conversation with somebody who you might know, actually. He's just in case he doesn't want me to tell anybody's name, but he's a Marine and he did some stuff with the agency. We were talking about like what would happen if we had basically like generational wealth. And he was like, I would just go on a beach somewhere and maybe buy a surf shop or something that somebody else ran for me, but I just kick it. And he's like, what would you do? I'm like, everything I'm doing now, but more. Like, I would be doing 100% the same thing. I'd be doing Code of the West, but I would be pouring the resources into it.
Yeah.
Because it's a vocation to me.
I agree. Like I now know what my path is and like how passionate I am to teach and all the things I've learned and how good they are for you. Like as a human, I'm like, man, I want to make that available. Like how good I feel right now doing what I'm doing and the life that I'm living. I want to give that and make that available to more people and flatten that curve,
Have you read Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill?
It's not fresh off my mind. No.
Okay. I'll text it to you or DM it to you afterwards. Like because it dovetails perfectly with that Denzel Washington quote. It's an old book. It's kind of snake oily, but in a useful way. Like the cliff note is that this guy claimed to have had this sort of letter of introduction as a journalist to go and meet everybody who was an industrialist or a mover and a shaker in the early 20th century. So he claims to have gone and talked to Ford, Henry Ford, that is, John Jacob Astor, and Carnegie and all these guys. And then he creates what ends up being the first self-help book, which essentially is like been reiterated. It's been redone by guys like Earl Nightingale, and then The Secret. But basically the gist of the book is, if you want to do something and you have all of your faculties, you have all of your limbs, there's no agent preventing you from doing it, then that means you're choosing not to do it. And that means you're the one responsible for not moving in that direction. And I remember reading that when I was like 19 and being like, son of a bitch, I have to go make comics still. Like, because I'd try to walk away from it after high school.
That's cool though. That's 19, dude. You know what I mean?
But it's a worthwhile book to read.
I'll definitely check it out if you text me, because I got a 2-second memory. But
yeah, well, and also it's so old. You could probably, if you have like Audible or something, you could probably find a free Audible version of it online if you wanted to.
Oh, I like getting used books on Amazon.
Yeah. Oh, that. Like, yeah. Trust me,
there's history in them.
Yeah.
But no, I think that's super true. I think society has created this super self-reliant, alive dead population. And man, I think that's the biggest tragedy of humanity, and that's why I'm thankful for everything the military did me in the perspective of time and all loss that I've experienced, and the perspective of not wasting it, and really being able to live this Western lifestyle now where I appreciate everything that I have. I pour time and effort and love and tears into every single thing that I build, and it's really my why is my kids, and is to I understand now that generational piece.
Mm-hmm.
I understand why you'll fight for it, and that's my why. My why every day is to leave something that allows you to be grounded in this to my kids, so they don't have to go through that gnarly trajectory to find their good, whatever that good is that they're going to bring to the world.
Well, that is a perfect way, I think, to wrap this one up because I don't know how you feel about it, but like, I feel like you and I are gonna have to talk again at some point.
Yeah, I'm good with that.
Yeah. Man, we definitely went over an hour than we thought we were going to, but we also kind of thought that there was a possibility. That's fine.
I felt like we were kind of warming up for a bit, so it works.
Yeah, yeah. Then we got that momentum going, but yeah, I think that I definitely let's do this again some point because I think that there's a lot probably that we can both share, not just like as a podcast, but like you're going to be building your ranch, and the school. I'm hopefully not going to go belly up with Code of the West by then. I'm trying to do what I can to keep it going. In the meantime,
No way, you got to make a comic book for me, dude. So
yeah, at some point
we'll sell it at the farm store for the kids.
yeah, here's how you milk a cow.
Yeah,
There was actually like Milton Caniff is a famous cartoonist, and he actually did a lot of drawn handbooks for in World War II for the United States because at that time there was still a lot of people who didn't read, and so you had this like amazing cartoonist that was basically like, here's how you put a gas mask on, here's how you disassemble an M1 Garand.
that's pretty cool.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, like, because that's the thing too for me is that like I actually don't even really use the drawing that much right now because I'm so busy telling stories. I draw when I try to
Oh,
carve some
but they're
time out.
so cool. I won't lie, like the one of Jeremiah that you did and the one of Emmy that you did, I was like, damn, that's dope. Like,
Yeah, those ones take a little bit of time too, which I mean, I love doing them. Like, I mean, so both of those are based on photos that I took when I was up in Ennis a
yeah,
couple years ago.
at the branding,
Yeah,
the
at the bear
rodeo,
hug
right? The
thing.
ranch rodeo. Yeah,
Yeah, and that's one of the things that I need to remember to keep doing because when I'm doing things like the John Wayne stuff, I'm like, I'm there to do a thing, like I'm taking photos, I'm taking videos for the purpose of like telling this type of story. And I forget that like, oh
yeah,
shit, like I should just make sure I have a camera with me that I can just take some photos where I can like have reference to draw later. Um,
yeah.
and because that's the thing too. It's like, even though this whole journey is basically a byproduct of me wanting to draw comics, it's evolved, and this is why I feel like Code of the West is like very much your why. Like you're saying, I've never fit in completely somewhere, even at Black Rifle, where I got to do a lot of stuff. Like Evan was just like, go forth and conquer. Um, I still was always kind of like what somebody wanted me to be that day. Somebody needed a drawing, then I'm the illustrator that day. Somebody needs a marketing plan or an idea, I'm that guy today. Code of the West, I get to be everything. I get to be all of
Yeah.
me in one thing. And granted, I'm not using all those things at the same time, but I'm not putting myself in a box. I just get to
It's,
be me.
dude, it is a beautiful and freeing thing. You know what I mean? But the beauty of that is that dudes like us that have reached to that, you know, now we get to be like, hey, how can I help you?
100%.
And
100%.
how can we complement each other and mesh and continue to build that community? And that really is what the community is.
Well, and I think that that's kind of the
It's
cool thing too about like where some of us have begun to figure out how to have a platform around it. And it's like, well, okay, maybe that's its own kind of community then. That we're not just influencers being like, hey, like taking
yeah,
pictures
dude, I
next to
hate that.
it's a thing. I get it,
That's why yeah, but the reason I've been doing my story thing is this is the first year I've
which is
lost
great,
more
by the
friends.
way.
Thank you. It's because I've lost more friends to suicide than to combat at this point. And I was
Uh-huh.
like, man, I go talk to 8 veterans a year with Nodens. I sit around a fire and I share, like, I had a pretty gnarly transition. It was fucking rough. And I called the VA after a crazy thing with Margot where I just like blacked out and like for help, and they're like, we can't help you for 6 months. And I was like, no wonder dudes are fucking killing themselves, you know? And like, so I called the vet center, and they're like, we'll get you in tomorrow. And like, thank goodness, you know? And like, that was really the piece that like brought me back up. Right. But, I have a TBI and I totally just forgot what I was saying.
We were talking about community and this idea of a virtual community, and
yes. So that's why I want to tell a story, just to help vets, really. But I love what you're doing, where you ask that question and people are able to share. That doesn't exist anywhere, but that is the beginning. And I think maybe subconsciously that's probably what helped me to come to the idea of sharing. And man, why am I just trying to hold this for dudes like me? You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Everybody can benefit from this.
Mm-hmm.
This is humanity can benefit from this. You know
sure.
what I mean? And that's
what that means there's value to it.
Yeah, that's what you're providing, is people sharing experience.
Well, I struggle with that still.
Whatever that is.
I think that when you are somebody who, I don't want to say I'm self-deprecating, but I have a greater tendency to see other people's value as being greater than my own, and certainly with life experiences. But I also realized, kind of like that thing I keep going back to with Steven putting his hand on my shoulder, like there are things that we don't realize are common to all of us. You know, we hurt in similar ways, or we all respond to abnormal situations when we experience them for the first time in our own subjective versions. But
absolutely.
But like there are common, like the way I've realized death. This is a hell of a way to not stop the podcast. With death was almost like, this is a weird analogy, and I don't mean to be crass, but it's the only way I can say it. It's almost like losing your virginity. Like it's something that everybody knows is going to happen, but there's no way to explain it to somebody ahead of time. So it's almost like you don't even bother, especially in the West.
Yeah.
Like you're just kind of like left in the wind, and there. That's why I think Steven's response was probably the most honest response I've ever experienced when it comes to being around or in the middle of that sort of feeling when you lose people, especially when you don't understand how it happened. Like that's not unique to me, is what I've realized. You know, it's like this is a thing that happens to every human, and that sometimes just knowing you're not the only human that it's happened to makes a difference.
We are not solitary beings. We are interconnected. I truly believe that. You know, we're living out here and doing the ranch thing. Like, I've never been hippie in my life, but I'll tell you, until I'm blue in the face, that we are interconnected to this earth, you know, like, and to each other and everything else. But I will say, you know, you cannot compare your value to somebody else's value, you know, and I think that is one. I'll say that listening to your story and those moments for you, dude, without a doubt, that's God. That's whatever you want to call it. Bringing those two things together to have that connection at that moment in time of need and everything else, that is God. You know what I mean? And so that tells you without a shadow of doubt that you are on the path you're supposed to be on. And as far as value goes, dude, that's not a thing, because true value, who is somebody to value you? Nobody knows what you've been through. Nobody knows your entire being. You know, I'm going to value you for the shirt you have on or the shoes. Dude, that is so surface level.
And I know that.
I know, but you have to, especially now with what you're doing now, you have to look at your work and look at it as divine and purposeful, which it is. Outside looking in, extremely, and you're doing the right thing. And the thing is, another thing I listen to is, when you're favored by God and you're walking with God and you're on that path of that rightness, you're no longer favored by the devil, and the devil's going to be hunting you and things will be hard. You know what I mean? But really, Maddie told me the other night, she's like, you need to do this. You need to teach. And I had a complete meltdown.
Really?
You know? And and I went out and I got emotional and I brought a horse out and I tried to like figure my shit out and get my composure back. And she comes out and she's like, "Are you okay?" She's like, "It's because you're supposed to, you know." And dude, that was powerful for me because it's so easy to fight it,
Mm-hmm.
but then it's undeniable how right it feels. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Sorry. I have these weird moments with Code of the West where, like I said, I'll slow down or something will slow me down because it's a lot of times I kind of will look at it and I'm like, well, it's an Instagram account. Even though I started it for reasons not to make a big Instagram account, it was just a storytelling medium. I still have this tendency to be like, well, it's an Instagram account. And I'm not going to say the woman's name because it would just be not right. But I had a woman send me a DM, and I have my account set up that anybody can DM me. Doesn't necessarily mean that like it automatically goes into my inbox, but I check the requests. And it was just a really, I might cry. I probably will, but I don't get like sobby, just a heads up.
You're good, dude.
But she just said that she just lost her 2-month-old son 2 weeks before she was texting me or DMing me, and that every day she just gets up and looks at what I write on Code of the West, and she was reading it before, and she just said it gave her courage to get through her day, and don't even know what to do with that, because it's like, I mean, hypothetically, I want to help people, and that's the point. But it is very strange to just realize that, there's just value in me talking, and just telling
Dude,
my story.
it is, but do you realize what that is?
Probably not.
Do you realize what that is? You've told me stories of people touching you and giving you hope and giving you what you need to drive on. That is God telling you that you are doing right. You just did for that lady what those people have done for you. And
I don't
you
know
don't know
why
how
you got to
many,
tell me that for me to understand that.
and you don't know how many other people you're doing that for.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That dude, that is God talking through your work. That is what we are supposed to be doing.
Yeah. Well, that's you point something out that
You take that and you smile and you look and you say, "Thank you." You know what I mean?
I'm
Like
extremely grateful.
that's your sign. That's your sign that He is with you and that you're doing what you're supposed to be doing right
that
now. That you might be making Air Jordans next year. You don't know where
Yeah, I
you're
don't
going
know,
in
but
this
right
path.
now I
But
get
right
to.
now, where you are exactly where you're supposed to be, my friend, doing exactly what you're supposed to be
I
doing.
feel like you're doing the same thing. I mean, I have to imagine that. I mean, like knowing Craighead, for instance, like he was walking around Black Rifle and no one really knew what to do with it because it's like he's basically like a 80s movie action star. And he's like, I mean, anybody who's an operator knows that you can't really hold a candle to like clearing a compound by yourself. Um, and he and I would go to the Lego store together and at the mall here, or like we went and got, or I got these glasses with him. We went and got our eyes checked at Warby Parker together. But I say this because you can look at him as this sort of like ultimate thing, and then he goes out and he makes content where he's talking about how he's struggling and how he doesn't know how he's going to get through the day, and it gives permission. Because I mean, there's obviously a lot of civilians too who are sort of they like the cosplay aspect, and they want to go train and they want to learn, and that's all good stuff. But like, I think that they also can tell a story to themselves about how they think an operator needs to be, and then you got this carbon copy of a carbon copy where no one's talking, no one's being real, and to have someone like Craighead or someone like you telling people, I'm not okay all the time. Like, I imagine you probably have had your own version of this since you started telling your story on Instagram.
Yeah, I mean, full transparency, the only people I've ever told that story that I'm sharing on Instagram right now, and that's just the surface level, right?
Yeah.
It's those 8 veterans a year for the last 3 years at Noda's Outdoors. I break down. I a little bit, and I think every year it's going to get easier. It doesn't
Yeah.
get easier, and I watch lions among men cry and process and grow. And you know what's fucking crazy? We pair that program with the Aura Ring. The Aura Ring
the biometric thing?
Yep, and we give them all their baseline vitals when they start for the year, and they're all shit. And their HRV is really what we look at, because if their HRV is good, their sleep will be good, which means that their ability to deal with their day will be better. And so we try to improve their HRV. We had 8 of those guys sitting in a room in big couches while I shared my story. All 7 of those 8 guys all admitted to trying to kill themselves at least once. They all shared trauma that they've never told anybody, even their wives. And the next day, that ring asked them to record their extreme workout from the night before. Nobody was doing anything but sitting there talking.
Whoa.
And then all of their HRVs spiked. And usually after your HRV spikes, you have to have a recovery window. Their HRV spiked and stayed. We had a medic, we had a doctor from Special Operations Tier 1 who's been trying to unhook his HRV from low for 4 years. Wasn't able to. His HRV spiked bigger than anybody else's in that room that
I just got a chill down my back.
Dude, it's fucking... that's how you know. People are like, oh, it's good to talk about things. No, it is physiologically and neurologically extremely beneficial to go through that and unbox it, and then, dude, rise from the ashes.
Wow, to have the data behind that too is crazy.
Yeah, and nobody's been able to like really record that, and like, well, because you know how it is. A lot of people, just like you just said, I don't know what to do with that.
Yeah,
a lot of guys just don't know what to do with it. They don't know, and then they need to prove it to themselves, and they're not just in their head.
Uh-huh.
You know what I mean?
Uh-huh.
And I really think that really looking the man in the mirror and really looking at your life and looking at your trajectory and looking at your true divine purpose and what you're doing and what you're actually catering to, it takes that honest recognition of your current condition and where you're going to really know for sure you're where you're supposed to be,
Wow. Yeah, man, I feel like we're definitely going to have to talk again, because I mean, we went another 20 minutes after I was like, oh, that's a good place to wrap up.
I'm going to have to go help feed the girls for Maddie Kills Me, but
yeah. Yeah, we'll make sure that we're going to talk again, and obviously we're going to stay in contact, but because this just kind of opened up a whole nother can of worms in my mind, but we'd be talking for another 3 hours, so we'll just do another podcast down the road. But
easy.
I can't thank you enough.
I'll send you my cell phone.
Okay.
So you call, text anytime. Text
yeah, likewise.
My cell.
I can't thank you enough. I mean, like I knew that we'd have a good conversation, but yeah, this is like, I didn't think I was gonna have a healing conversation with you.
Dude, vice versa. It's refreshing, my friend, to talk to somebody that's been through and is going through the same things. I promise you right now, you are on the exact path that you're supposed to be on.
I promise you, you are as well. Like, yeah, Maddie's right. You should be a teacher.
No, you're doing good things.
Likewise,
I promise
sir.
That's just the beginning.
Well, hang with me for a second. I want to stop recording here. Okay, we're